Greetings, Lore Masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers the fragile vanity of the College of Winterhold's finest, and specifically, the fatal mistake of believing that a piece of embroidered linen can stop a rusted axe. We are delving into the mindset of the pure mage, that alluring fantasy of wielding cosmic power while dressed in nothing but comfortable pajamas, and why Skyrim's harsh reality is so determined to crush that dream into the frozen mud. Imagine the Dragonborn standing atop the throat of the world, lightning crackling at their fingertips, robes billowing in the wind like a chaotic banner of destruction. It's a compelling image. It feels powerful. But let's be honest, that novice hood looks fantastic until a mud crab clips your ankle and you lose half your health bar because you forgot to cast a spell. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of Nirn. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins not in the halls of Aetherius, but on the dirty cobblestone road just outside of Whiterun. Here walks our protagonist, an aspiring wizard who has wholeheartedly embraced the archetype of the pure mage. They have rejected the clanking steel of the Nord warrior and the boiled leather of the thief. They are clad in the standard-issue blue mage robes found in the tutorial dungeons of Helgen, perhaps accompanied by a hood that offers a meagre 30 points of extra magicka. They feel intellectual, superior. They are channeling the raw energies of the universe, unencumbered by the crude weight of iron or steel. But there is a term for this specific build in the harsh lexicon of Tamrielic survival, the paper tiger. The fundamental failure of the pure mage begins with a simple, brutal calculation of physics that the game engine adheres to with sadistic precision. The Dragonborn is walking toward Valtheim Towers, confident in their ability to incinerate the bandits lurking on the bridge. The wind howls through the mountain pass, carrying the scent of pine and impending violence. Our mage spots the first bandit, hands raise, engulfed in the golden glow of a fire spell. It is a moment of cinematic beauty. And then an arrow, fired from a mediocre hunting bow by a bandit with poor posture, strikes the mage in the shoulder. If this were a warrior clad in steel plate, the arrow would glance off with a metallic pings, registering as nothing more than a nuisance. But for the robe wearer, the arrow meets zero resistance. There is no armor rating. There is no damage mitigation. The arrow simply enters flesh, and the health bar, already distinctively lower because this mage has been dumping all their stat points into magicka, evaporates. This is the paper tiger paradox. The game encourages you to wear robes. It gives you robes that regenerate magicka faster, suggesting that this is the optimal way to play. The loading screens show high elves in flowing gowns looking majestic, yet the moment a physical object interacts with your character, the illusion shatters. You're not a demigod of destruction. You're a soft, squishy academic wandering through a province defined by blunt force trauma. Consider the sensation of the kill cam. It is a mechanic designed to highlight triumph, but for the pure mage, it is a recurring documentary of their own demise. The camera zooms out, time slows, and we watch in excruciating detail as a two-handed warhammer, swung by a chaotic neutral marauder, descends upon the mage's skull. The robes do nothing. They don't even tear. They just clip through the weapon as the character model crumples into a heap of ragdoll physics. It is a stark reminder that in Skyrim, cloth is a category of armor that offers exactly zero protection. It is equivalent to fighting naked, only with more pockets. The lore, interestingly enough, tries to warn us about this. If one were to read The Art of War Magic, a tactical treatise attributed to the underappreciated Battlemage Zurin Arctus, the text emphasizes that a wizard must control the battlefield precisely because they cannot withstand the attrition of melee. Arctus implies that a mage who lets an enemy get close is a dead mage. However, Skyrim is a land of ambush predators. Sabracats do not announce their presence with a duel challenge. They launch themselves from the snowdrifts at 40 miles per hour. A robe offers no buffer against a silent pounce. This fragility creates a frantic, panic-induced gameplay loop. To survive as a pure mage in robes, one must rely on the Alteration School of Magic, specifically the flesh spells: oak flesh, stone flesh, iron flesh, and eventually ebony flesh. These spells grant a temporary armor rating simulating the protection of actual gear. The mage must cast these every 60 seconds. This turns the Dragonborn into a neurotic clockwatcher. Instead of looking at the majestic skyline of Solitude, the mage is staring at the active effects corner of the screen, terrified that their stone flesh is about to expire right as a bear crests the hill. When the spell drops, and it always drops at the worst possible moment, the mage reverts instantly to having an armor rating of 0. It is like driving a tank that turns into a bicycle every minute. The reliance on this mechanic highlights the absurdity of the robe lifestyle. If the only way to make robes viable is to use magic to pretend you are wearing armor, why not just wear the armor? The community has debated this design choice for over a decade. Veteran adventurers often point to the disappearance of the unarmored skill line, which was present in The Elder Scrolls III: Morrowind. Back in the alien landscapes of Vardenfell, a monk or wizard could train their body to dodge blows or harden their skin naturally, making a robe-wearing build mechanically distinct and viable without constant spellcasting. In Skyrim, that nuance is gone. You're either armoured or you're a victim. There is no middle ground where your agility saves you. The hitboxes are generous, and the enemy tracking is relentless. Let's return to our mage at Valtheim Towers. They have managed to heal from the arrow wound, consuming 3 minor potions that taste like stale strawberries. They push forward. A bandit chief steps out, wielding a steel battle axe. The mage panics. They try to backpedal, casting Frostbite to slow the enemy down, but the terrain is uneven. Skyrim is 90% uneven terrain, and the mage gets stuck on a small rock. The distance closes. The mage is wearing the Archmage's robes, a garment supposedly steeped in the history of Shalador and the great wizards of old. It has complex enchantments woven into every thread. But when that steel axe connects with the mage's ribcage, the game does not care about Shalador. It calculates damage against an armor value of 0. The result is a one-hit kill on higher difficulties. The mage's body is launched off the bridge, tumbling down into the White River, a majestic bundle of blue cloth and failure. This vulnerability forces the pure mage into a playstyle of cowardice. While the heavy armor warrior kicks open doors and shouts challenges at Draugr Deathlords, the robe-wearer finds themselves crouching in corners, exploiting pathfinding glitches, and standing on top of tables where the AI cannot reach them. The all-powerful wizard fantasy devolves into a game of the floor is lava, where the lava is literally anything that can touch you. The aesthetic of the robe is a trap. It signals to the world and to the game's AI that you are a high-priority target with low survivability. Even the bandits seem to know this. Notice how often enemy archers will ignore the tanky companion Lydia, who is actively hitting them with a sword to shoot at the wizard dancing in the background. They know. The AI understands the paper tiger paradox better than the player does. They see the robes and they see a free kill. There is also a grim irony in the crafting of these garments. We are told in various item descriptions that mage robes are spun from Magicka-infused threads, sometimes involving silk from Morrowind or wool treated with alchemical salts. Yet, they possess less structural integrity than the rough-spun tunic the Dragonborn wakes up in on the cart to execution. A prisoner's rags have the same defensive value as the master robes of destruction. Think about that. You can spend thousands of gold, master the arcane arts, and become the head of the college, and your clothes are statistically identical to a beggar's outfit in terms of stopping a dagger. This leads to a psychological toll on the player. You start to flinch at everything. A falling rock trap, which a warrior would just absorb and grunt at, becomes a lethal event. You develop a fear of tight corridors. You dread the sound of a fulmar emerging from a Chorus cocoon, because you know that one dose of poison, without armor to mitigate the initial hit, will tick your health down to 0 before you can open the menu. The pure mage in robes is fighting 2 wars, one against the enemies of Skyrim, and one against the inherent squishiness of their own wardrobe. It is a vanity project. We wear the robes because we want to look the part, because we want to embody the archetype. But the game punishes this vanity with the ruthlessness of a physics engine that equates cloth with air. Every time you reload a save after being decapitated by a bandit who didn't even use a power attack, you are confronted with the reality that you are failing. You are bringing a spellbook to a sword fight, and you forgot to put on a helmet. As the sun sets over the tundra, and our mage lies broken on the riverbank, the stars of the constellation of the mage shine down indifferently. They offer power, yes. They offer the ability to reshape reality. But they do not offer a chest plate. and in the brutal kinetic world of Skyrim, where dragons bite and giants stomp, the refusal to wear hard protection is not a sign of superior magical affinity. It is a death wish wrapped in velvet. Having established that your wardrobe is essentially a death warrant woven from fancy napkins, we must now address the engine that drives the paper tiger. The blue bar, the Magicka bar, the fuel tank of your arcane destruction. The pure mage looks at the enchanting table or the loot chest, sees a set of adept robes of destruction, boasting a 100% faster Magicka regeneration bonus, and thinks they have discovered a cheat code. They imagine themselves as a living conduit of infinite power, a Tesla coil that can never be unplugged. The math they assume is on their side. If they regenerate Magicka twice as fast, they can cast twice as many fireballs. This is the Magicka Regeneration Lie, and it is the second reason you are failing. The deception is subtle because the game does not explicitly explain the rules of engagement. When you are walking through the peaceful streets of solitude, admiring the stonework and listening to the bards, your Magicka regenerates at a brisk, satisfying pace. You cast a candlelight spell just for the ambience, and the bar refills almost instantly. You feel powerful, you feel sustainable, the robes are working, but the moment a slaughterfish bites your toe, or a red dot appears on your compass, the rules change. The game engine applies a hidden, brutal modifier known as the combat regeneration penalty. Here is the cold reality the loading screens don't tell you. The moment you enter a combat state, your base Magicka regeneration is slashed to 1/3 of its normal rate. That 33% effectiveness is the baseline. Now apply your fancy robes, you have 100% Magicka regeneration. In the safety of the college library, that doubles your speed, but in the heat of battle, when a frost troll is winding up a haymaker, that 100% bonus is applying to the crippled 1/3 combat rate. You aren't doubling a roaring river, you're doubling a dripping faucet. Picture the scenario. You're deep within Bleakfall's Barrow. You encounter the Overlord. You open with your strongest spell, perhaps a dual-casted lightning bolt. It looks spectacular. The room lights up, thunder crashes, and the Draugr's health bar takes a decent chunk of damage. But your blue bar, it is gone. You've spent 80% of your reserves in 2 seconds. Now comes the regeneration phase. You backpedal, waiting for the bar to fill up so you can fire again. You watch the blue meter. It crawls. It inches forward with the lethargy of a mud crab in molasses. The Draugr is not waiting. He is charging. You're running in circles, jumping over coffins, breathing heavy, desperately praying for just enough juice to cast one more spark. The robes you're wearing, the ones that promised you infinite power, are mathematically failing you when you need them most. This creates a humiliating gameplay loop familiar to every early game mage. You fire your salvo, then you spend the next 45 seconds sprinting away from enemies, playing a game of tag while your resources trickle back in. You aren't a wizard, you're a jogger with a sparkler. The lore provides a fascinating, if slightly esoteric, backdrop for this mechanic. Magicka, as understood by the scholars of the Synod and the College of Whispers, is raw creatia bleeding into Mundus from Aetherius, the immortal plane, through the sun and stars. The sun, Magnus, is literally a hole in reality where magic leaks in. When you cast a spell, you are channeling this extra-dimensional energy through your own Magicka reservoir, which is essentially your soul's capacity to hold this starlight. There is a theory among the more philosophical lore masters that the combat penalty represents the difficulty of maintaining spiritual focus while under mortal threat. It is easy to channel the infinite energies of Aetherius when you are meditating on a mountaintop. It is significantly harder to keep that cosmic connection open when a bandit is trying to turn your skull into a drinking cup. The adrenaline of the mortal body conflicts with the serenity required to channel Magicka. The hole in your soul tightens up in a panic response, throttling the flow of power. However, recognizing this doesn't help you survive the frost troll. The irony of the pure mage build is that by prioritizing regeneration on their gear, they are investing in a stat that diminishes in value exactly when it matters. A warrior's stamina regenerates sluggishly too, but a warrior can still swing a sword when they are tired. It just isn't a power attack. A mage with no Magicka is nothing. You're a civilian in a dress. You find yourself frantically switching to that iron dagger you picked up by mistake, flailing at an armoured skeleton with a weapon skill of 15, doing damage equivalent to a gentle slap. This leads us to the great community debate of regen versus cost reduction. For years, novice mages have fallen for the trap of the robes, seeing that regen number and chasing it. Veteran players, the ones who have survived the crucible of legendary difficulty, know the truth. Cost reduction is king. If you enchant a helmet, a ring, a necklace, and a chess piece with Fortify Destruction, you can reduce the cost of your spells by 25% each. With 4 pieces, the cost becomes 0. If a spell costs 0 Magicka, you do not need regeneration. You have bypassed the economy of the game entirely. You become a machine gun of fireballs. But the pure mage in standard robes does not have this luxury. They are stuck with the regeneration mechanic. They are bound to the lie. Consider the desperate measures this forces the player to take. We have all done it. The weight scumming. You clear a room, but your Magicka is empty. You know there is a boss in the next chamber. So you stand in the middle of a dank Draugr-infested crypt, press the wait button, and stand motionless for 1 in-game hour. From a role-playing perspective, this is absurd. Imagine the Dragonborn, the saviour of the world, standing perfectly still in a hallway, staring at a wall for an hour while their companion Lydia shifts awkwardly from foot to foot. Are we going, my Thane? Hush, Lydia. I am absorbing starlight. It breaks the immersion, but the frailty of the regeneration mechanic demands it. You cannot proceed without a full tank, and the tank fills too slowly on its own. There is one exception, one racial ability that highlights just how broken the base regeneration is by contrast, the Altmer Highborn power. For 60 seconds once a day, High Elves regenerate Magicka rapidly, ignoring the combat penalty. When you pop Highborn, you feel like what a mage should be. The bar refills instantly. You can unleash a torrent of lightning. It feels chaotic and godlike. But then the 60 seconds are up. You're back to the trickle. The contrast is jarring. It shows you what you are missing. It reveals that the standard gameplay experience for a mage is one of scarcity, while the game tries to sell you a fantasy of abundance. Furthermore, the reliance on regeneration robes creates a vulnerability to one of the most annoying enemy types in the game, the Shock Mage. Lightning spells in Skyrim drain both health and Magicka. If you are a warrior, a lightning bolt hurts, but you can still run up and smash the caster. If you're a pure mage relying on regeneration, a lightning bolt is a hard counter. You step into range of a necromancer. They hit you with lightning bolt. Not only does it damage you, but it vaporizes the Magicka you are waiting to regenerate. You are now at 0. You try to wait for it to tick up. They hit you again. You're locked down, silenced not by a specific silence spell, but by the sheer mechanics of resource denial. Your 150% regen robes are useless because you have no pool to regenerate into before it gets zapped away again. You're being battery drained in real time. There is also the sensory betrayal of the out of Magicka sound effect. That hollow, dry, whoosh noise when you try to cast a spell with an empty bar. It is the sound of impotence. It usually happens right when you have lined up the perfect shot. You press the trigger, expecting an explosion, and get a puff of failure. The enemy doesn't flinch. They just keep coming. In the end, the robes of regeneration are a placebo. They make you feel better while walking between quest markers, but they abandon you in the dungeon. They are designed for a version of the game where combat is slow and tactical, not the chaotic scrum that Skyrim actually is. By wearing them, you are signalling to the game that you accept the penalty, that you're willing to fight at 33% efficiency because you like the way the hood frames your face. But as the Draugr swarm over your position and your hands spark with that pathetic empty tank fizzle, you realise that the blue bar was never your friend. It was a leash. And by refusing to wear armour that could house cost reduction enchantments or simply protect you while you recharge, you have tightened that leash around your own neck. The paper tiger isn't just fragile, it's running on empty. We have discussed the fragility of your body and the lie of your fuel source. Now we must address the trap of the reward system itself. The game tricks you into believing that the greatest artifacts in Skyrim are hidden at the bottom of ancient dungeons, guarded by dragon priests or locked away in the Archmage's quarters. You finish the College of Winterhold questline, a journey that likely involved you getting thrashed by magical anomalies and running away from Moroki, and you are rewarded with the Archmage's robes. You put them on. They look incredible. They have a fur mantle, intricate embroidery, and a hood that screams, "I am the boss of this school." The stats seem impressive at a glance. A 15% reduction in spell cost for all schools, 50 extra Magicka, and that seductive 100% Magicka regeneration. You feel like you have reached the pinnacle. You're wearing the legacy of Shalidor. But here is the heartbreaking truth. A pair of iron boots enchanted by a semi-competent hobo in a basement is statistically superior to the legendary raiment of the Archmage. This is the reality of enchanting your own destiny, and it is the third reason your pure mage build is failing. You're relying on unique items that are frankly mediocre, instead of engaging with the most broken, overpowered mechanic in the history of the Elder Scrolls, the enchanting table. The pure mage has an aversion to the crafting skills. They think, I am a scholar, not a labourer. I do not hammer iron or stitch leather. This elitism is your downfall. While you're strutting around in your preset robes, the optimised player is hunkered down over an arcane enchanter, smelling of ozone and soul dust, breaking the game's math over their knee. Let's look at the numbers. The Archmage's robes offer a 15% cost reduction. That is nice. It applies to everything. But remember our previous lesson. Cost reduction is the only stat that matters. If you take a simple iron cuirass, the kind of trash bandits wear, and you have mastered the enchanting skill tree, specifically the Twin Souls perk, you can slap 2 enchantments on that chest piece. You can apply Fortify Destruction and Fortify Restoration. With the right perks and a Grand Soul gem, that single piece of rusted iron can reduce the cost of your destruction spells by 25%. And because it is armour, not clothing, it also contributes to a damage reduction rating that actually exists. Now, do the math across the rest of your kit. You enchant a helmet, or a circlet if you must show your face, a ring and a necklace. That is 4 slots. 4 slots times 25% reduction equals 100% reduction. 0 cost. You can cast Incinerate, a spell that usually burns through your Magicka bar like a forest fire, indefinitely. You can hold down the triggers for the master level Lightning Storm and channel it until the heat death of the universe. The Archmage's robes cannot do this. They cap out. They leave you with a bill to pay. Custom enchanted gear makes magic free. The moment you achieve 100% cost reduction, the game fundamentally changes. You're no longer playing Skyrim, you are playing a god simulator. You walk into a room, hold down the fire button, and everything dies. You don't look at your blue bar because the blue bar doesn't move. You have transcended the economy of Magicka. But to get there, you have to embrace the aesthetic of the Battlemage, or at least the armoured caster, and you have to engage in the industrial slaughter required to fill soul gems. The lore behind enchanting is grim, and it adds a layer of darkness to this optimization that fits the power at any cost theme of a true wizard. When you enchant an item, you are binding a soul, the animus of a creature, into the object to power the effect. In the timeline of the Elder Scrolls, the art of enchanting has actually degraded over the eras. In the ancient days, during the time of the Aelids or the early Nords, enchanting was a complex ritual of singing and sympathetic magic. However, consider the obscure figure of Azidal. You meet him, or what's left of him, in the Dragonborn DLC, but his lore is scattered in books like Azidal's Descent. He was the first great Nord enchanter. He travelled to the elves, the dwarves, the unknown teachers, learning everything. He eventually went mad because he realised that the pursuit of perfection in crafting required sacrifices that the mortal mind couldn't handle. His armour set, specifically the mask Azidal, boosts fire damage and crucially enchanting skill. Azidal understood what the modern pure mage forgets. The gear makes the wizard. He didn't rely on found loot, he forged his own power. By refusing to craft, you are ignoring the legacy of the greatest mage your people ever produced. The community has taken Azidal's philosophy to a logical, game-breaking extreme known as the Fortify Restoration loop. It is a debate that still rages in forums. Is it cheating or is it chim? The loop involves drinking a potion of Fortify Restoration, which glitches the game into thinking your Fortify Alchemy gear is stronger, allowing you to brew a stronger potion, which makes the gear stronger, and so on. Eventually you craft a ring that gives you 4,000 Magicka. We aren't even suggesting you go that far. Even without the glitches, vanilla enchanting crushes, unique loot. The tragedy of the pure mage is the visual sacrifice. We want to wear the robes because they look right. We want to look like Gandalf or a Jedi. We don't want to wear a mismatched set of dwarven braces and an orcish helmet just because the stats are better. But Skyrim punishes this aesthetic loyalty. The game engine is a brutal utilitarian. It does not reward you for role-playing. it rewards you for math. There is a specific melancholy to the mid-game realization that the loot you find in dungeon chests is worthless to you. You open a master-locked chest, fiddle with the tumblers for precious minutes, and inside you find a Robes of Recovery. You look at it, you check the stats. It gives plus 75% Magicka Regen. You're already wearing something better that you made yourself at level 20. The excitement of exploration dies a little bit. The loot lust fades. You realize that you are the sole source of value in this world. This leads to the enchanting grind, a rite of passage every optimized player endures. You're not adventuring. You're hunting mammoths for their grand souls. You're buying every filled petty soul gem from Farengar's Secret Fire to enchant hundreds of iron daggers with Banish Daedra or Turn Undead. Not because you need the daggers, but to grind the skill to 100. The sound of the enchanting table becomes the soundtrack of your life. That low, humming drone. The shing sound of the soul gem shattering. The text, item enchanted. Over and over. It is tedious. It is boring. It is the antithesis of the high adventure fantasy. But it is the necessary crucible. Compare this to the mage who refuses to enchant. They are stuck using the Staff of Magnus to drain Magicka because they ran out. They are wearing Morike, which looks cool, but due to a notorious bug in the original release code and some unpatched versions, the mask's enchantment sometimes doesn't even work properly with certain other perks. They are relying on developer-placed items that are often buggy, level-locked, or simply outclassed by a piece of leather worked on by a determined Dragonborn. Furthermore, the pure mage ignores the defensive utility of enchanting. Resist magic and resist fire, frost, shock are essential for survival on higher difficulties. You can put these on rings and necklaces, but if you're wearing robes, you are missing out on the ability to double dip on defensive slots that armor provides. A pair of armored boots can hold resist fire and fortify carry weight. A pair of cloth boots, if you can even find enchantable ones that aren't pre-enchanted unique items, are rare and offer no base protection. There is also a profound satisfaction in naming your own gear. The Archmage's robes is a title given to you. Voldemort's pajamas, crafted by your own hand, is a title you earned. When you slay a legendary dragon with a thunderbolt that costs 0 magicka, wearing a helmet you named the Thinking Cap of Doom, you have achieved a level of agency that the quest rewards can never give you. The reliance on found robes keeps you in a state of dependency. You are waiting for the game to give you a better version of what you have. Maybe at level 40 the loot tables will spawn master robes. You are passive. The enchanter is active. The enchanter looks at the code of the universe and rewrites it. Think about the extra effect perk at the top of the enchanting tree. It is arguably the most powerful perk in the entire game. It allows 2 enchantments on 1 item. This effectively doubles your equipment slots. By refusing to grind enchanting because it's not what my character would do, you're voluntarily playing with half an inventory. You're bringing one hand to a boxing match. And let's not forget the weapon enchantments. Even a pure mage might carry a backup dagger or a staff. If you rely on found staves, you're at the mercy of RNG, random number generation. If you craft your own, you can create a dagger of paralyzing chaos that stops enemies in their tracks and absorbs their health. The Archmage's robes are a symbol of office, nothing more. They are ceremonial garb. In the harsh, biting winds of Winterhold, where ice wraiths shimmer in the blizzard and dragons roost on the college roof, ceremony will not save you. Industrialized, weaponized, min-maxed enchantment will. So, take off the dusty robes you inherited from Savos Aren. They didn't save him, did they? He died because the Eye of Magnus sneezed on him. Put them on a mannequin in your Hearthfire house where they belong, go find an anvil, go find an enchanting table, and realize that the only magic that truly matters in Skyrim is the magic you hammer into the gear yourself. Once you have accepted the fragility of your robes and the necessity of managing your own enchantments, you inevitably stumble upon the one mechanic that holds the entire pure mage playstyle together like duct tape on a cracked engine block, the impact perk. This is the impact perk Crutch, and it is the 4th reason your build is spiritually failing, even if it is technically surviving. At level 40 in the destruction skill tree, the game offers you a choice that feels like an upgrade but is actually a pair of handcuffs. The perk description is simple. Most destruction spells stagger an opponent when dual cast. It sounds innocuous. It sounds helpful. But for the robe-wearing wizard, this is not just a tactical option. It is the entire survival strategy. It transforms the gameplay loop from a dynamic exchange of spells and dodges into a repetitive, rhythm-based panic attack. Here is the scenario. You are deep in a Dwemer ruin. A Falmer Gloomlurker comes charging out of the darkness. He is fast, he is poisoned, and he hits like a truck. If he touches you, you die. Your robes offer no protection. Your flesh spell has expired. So, what do? You press both mouse buttons or triggers simultaneously. You charge up a dual-cast firebolt. You release it. Boom! The Falmer stumbles backward, clutching his chest, his attack animation interrupted. He groans. He shakes his head, trying to regain his balance to charge again, but you are already charging the next one. Boom! He stumbles again. Boom! Again! You're now locked in a cycle of abuse. You're essentially bullying the AI. The enemy cannot move, cannot attack, and cannot defend. They are trapped in a perpetual state of getting the wind knocked out of them. On the surface, this looks like dominance. You are the Archmage, controlling the battlefield with kinetic force, but look closer at what is actually happening. You aren't fighting. You're stalling. You're terrified. You know that if you miss a single timing window, if you let that farmer finish his recover from stagger animation, he will close the gap and one-shot you. The impact perk is not a sign of your power. It is a confession of your vulnerability. You're keeping the enemy away because you cannot handle the reality of them being close. This reliance creates a severe tactical blindness. The pure mage stops learning how to dodge. They stop learning how to use terrain. They simply point their crosshair at the centre of mass and rely on the stagger mechanic to pause the game's difficulty. It works brilliantly against a single target. A giant, usually a terrifying threat that can launch you into orbit, becomes a helpless victim against a mage with impact. You can keep a giant stun-locked until he dies of boredom or fire damage, whichever comes first, but Skyrim rarely throws single enemies at you. This is where the crutch kicks out from under you. Enter 3 bandits. You dual cast at the first one. He staggers. Perfect. But while you're winding up your next shot, a painfully slow animation without high-level perks, the second bandit shoots you with an arrow, and the third bandit power attacks you with a greatsword. You cannot stagger 3 people at once with projectile spells unless they are standing in a perfect line, which they never are. The impact mage panics. They try to switch targets. They stagger Bandit B, but Bandit A has recovered and is now swinging. The rhythm is broken. The I win button has failed. Because you have relied so heavily on the stagger to survive, you have no backup plan. You have no armor to take the hit, no shield to block, and your stamina is likely too low to sprint away effectively because you dumped all your stats into Magicka. There is also the mathematical inefficiency of this addiction. The game mechanics dictate that dual casting a spell costs 2.8 times the Magicka of a single cast, but only delivers 2.2 times the damage. Read that again. You are paying a premium for the privilege of dual casting. You are losing efficiency every time you do it. The only reason to pay this stupidity tax is to trigger the impact perk. So, you are burning through your Magicka reserves at an accelerated rate. Remember the Regeneration Lie, just to keep the enemy in a stagger animation. This often leads to the horrifying moment where you have the enemy at 10% health, you are keeping them stun-locked, and then, whoosh, out of Magicka. The stagger ends. The enemy looks at you. You look at them. You have no mana. You have no stamina. You're wearing a dress. The result is inevitable. From a lore perspective, the impact perk represents a crude deviation from the pure schools of magic. In the text, response to Barrow's speech, a debate is recorded regarding the supremacy of the School of Destruction. The author argues that destruction is the most precise of the arts. However, the addition of pure kinetic force, the stagger, pushes destruction closer to the realm of mysticism or even the crude physical shouts of the voice. In ancient times, the Nords practiced the Thuum, which is essentially weaponized staggering. Unrelenting Force is the ultimate impact spell. By relying on your fireballs to shove people around, you're effectively acting as a budget tongue. You're mimicking the Dragonborn's shout with your hands because your actual magic isn't lethal enough to kill the target before they reach you. It's a cheap imitation of the power of the voice, woven into a fireball. The community has debated the stun lock meta for over a decade. Is it cheese? Is it an exploit? On legendary difficulty, many argue it is the only way to play a mage. Enemy health pools are so massive that you cannot possibly kill them before they reach you without impact. A bandit plunderer on Legendary can tank 20 incinerates. If you don't stagger him, he will kill you in one hit. So the game design forces you into this corner. To play a pure mage at high levels is to become a slave to the impact perk. You're no longer casting spells for their elemental properties, you're casting them for their crowd control properties. You stop using frost to drain stamina or shock to drain magicka. You just use whatever is cheapest to trigger the stagger. You become a one-trick pony. And what happens when the trick doesn't work? There are enemies in Skyrim that are immune to stagger, or at least highly resistant to it during certain animations. Dragons, while flying, or during certain strafing runs, do not care about your impact perk. They will breathe fire on you while you desperately wave your hands at them. Centurion Steam Masters often shrug off the first few hits due to their massive mass. Kustag, the hidden boss of the Dragonborn DLC, will laugh at your attempts to stagger him as he pummels you into the permafrost. Furthermore, relying on impact ruins the master level spells. We will delve deeper into this tragedy later, but consider the synergy, or lack thereof. You cannot dual cast the flashy two-handed master spells like Firestorm, therefore you cannot trigger impact with them. This means the coolest, highest level spells in the game leave you completely vulnerable, while the mid-tier Firebolt keeps you safe. You're discouraged from using your ultimate abilities because they lack the one mechanic that keeps you alive. The sensory experience of the impact playstyle is also surprisingly monotonous. The sound of dual casting is a heavy whooshing thrum. Shh, pow, shh, pow. It dominates the audio mix. You stop hearing the combat music. You stop hearing the banter of the bandits. You just hear the rhythm of your own fear. It also ruins the flow of dungeon delving. Instead of a fluid fight, every encounter becomes a series of stops and starts. You enter a room, you stunlock the Draugr Deathlord against a wall for 30 seconds, then you move to the next one. It feels less like a magical duel and more like you're pinning a butterfly to a board. There is a specific, agonizing moment familiar to every impact user. The miss. You're fighting a saber cat on the plains. It is sprinting at you. You charge your dual cast. You lead the target. You fire. The cat zigs. The fireball flies harmlessly past its ear. Because you dual casted, you are locked in a recoil animation. You cannot block. You cannot run immediately. The cat connects. The kill cam triggers. If you had been a warrior, you would have raised your shield. If you had been a thief, you would have stealth rolled. But you are an impact mage. You bet everything on that one shot connecting and stunning the target. You missed. The house wins. The impact perk is a seductive trap. It gives you the illusion of safety, convincing you that you can handle threats far above your weight class, and it works, right until it doesn't. It teaches you bad habits. It teaches you that enemies are static objects to be pushed around, rather than dynamic threats to be outmaneuvered. Ultimately, it reveals the hollowness of the pure mage defense. You aren't mitigating damage. You're praying that damage never happens. You're walking a tightrope over a pit of spikes, juggling fireballs. The impact perk is your balance pole. It helps, sure. But wouldn't it be better to just walk on the solid ground of heavy armor? As you stand over the twitching body of a bandit you just stun-locked into a corner, watching your Magicka bar slowly crawl back up from zero, ask yourself, was that a battle of wits and arcane mastery? Or was it just a panic reaction from someone who knows that one slap from a rusty gauntlet would end their adventure? The impact perk keeps you alive, but it keeps you living in fear. If the impact perk is a crutch, then what comes next is a wheelchair made of Daedric energy. We arrive now at the inevitable gravity of the Skyrim universe, the black hole that swallows all character builds eventually, the stealth archer descent. You might think, I am a pure mage, I deal in fire and lightning, I would never stoop to plucking a string like a common wood elf. But the game knows better. The game knows that your robes are thin, your magicka is finite, and your patience for being one-shot by two-handed bandit chiefs is wearing thin. The descent begins innocently enough. It usually starts with the realization that destruction magic, for all its flash, is incredibly loud. When you cast a fireball, you are announcing your position to the entire dungeon. Every Draugr wakes up. Every Fulmer chitters. You are ringing the dinner bell, and you are the dinner. In a desperate bid to survive the paper tiger paradox we discussed earlier, you look for a way to engage enemies without immediately being swarmed. You open the conjuration tree. You see a spell called Bound Bow. Ah, you tell yourself, rationalizing the sin. This isn't a weapon, it's a spell. I'm summoning it from oblivion. I am still a wizard. I am just shaping my magicka into a projectile delivery system. This is the lie that begins the transformation. You travel to Fort Mole. This is a pilgrimage every veteran player knows. You fight your way into the prison section, check a specific bucket hidden underneath a lantern in the corner of a room, and there it is, the spell tome for Bound Bow. It is practically given to you. And once you cast it, you realize the terrible truth. This spell is better than any destruction magic you possess. The Bound Bow is not just a bow. Statistically, it is a Daedric bow, one of the highest tier weapons in the game, equipped with 100 Daedric arrows. It weighs nothing, which means you draw the string faster than a physical archer can. At early to mid levels, the damage output of this spectral weapon completely eclipses your flames and sparks. You release an arrow and the enemy drops. No magicka drain per second, no long wind-up, just clean, silent lethality. But the true corruption happens when you combine this with the illusion school. You are a mage after all, so you invest in illusion. You take the perk Quiet Casting. The description says it makes all spells silent. This includes the summoning of your bow. Now, the trap shuts tight. You can crouch in the shadows, cast Bound Bow without making a sound, and snipe enemies from across the room. Because you are wearing robes, you have no armor weight, making you naturally quieter than a thief in leather or a warrior in plate. You are, accidentally, the perfect stealth platform. You creep through the Nordic ruins. You see a Draga Deathlord. The old you, the pure mage, would have dual-casted a firebolt, panicked, run backward, chugged potions, and prayed for an impact stagger. The new you, the corrupted you, simply crouches. The stealth eye closes. You draw the spectral string. The bow hums with a low, ethereal vibration, a sound design choice that is undeniably satisfying. Thwip. The arrow strikes for 3x sneak attack damage. The Deathlord falls. He never saw you. He never moved. The relief is intoxicating. You didn't have to panic. You didn't have to manage your Magicka Regeneration because the bow stays summoned for 2 minutes. You didn't have to worry about your 0 armor rating because nobody's attacking you. The gameplay shifts from frantic survival horror kiting to a calm, methodical point-and-click adventure. This is where the pure mage dies and the mystic archer is born. You stop casting destruction spells. Why would you? Incinerate costs massive magicka and does X damage. The Bound Bow costs 0 magicka per shot and does X plus sneak multiplier damage. The math is brutal. The game is screaming at you that being a wizard with a bow is vastly superior to being a wizard with a spell. Let's look at the lore implication of what you are holding, just to add a layer of grim reality to your new playstyle. According to the text, Darkest Darkness, bound weapons are not just energy. They are actual lesser Daedra tasked or forced to assume the shape of a weapon. When you summon that glowing blue bow, you are dragging a spirit from oblivion and twisting its essence into a tool of murder. You aren't holding a piece of wood, you're gripping the tormented soul of a Dremora kin. It is metal as hell, but it's certainly a departure from the scholarly pursuits of the college. The community refers to this phenomenon as the stealth archer singularity. It is a running joke that no matter what character you create, an orc berserker, a Breton healer, a Khajiit brawler, you will essentially be a stealth archer by level 30. But for the pure mage, the temptation is strongest because the flaws of the magic system are so glaring. The stealth archer doesn't worry about resistances, mostly. The stealth archer doesn't worry about magicka pools. The stealth archer survives. There is a tragic irony in the skill progression. As you use the bound bow, you are leveling conjuration for summoning it, and archery for hitting things. Your destruction skill, which should be your primary output, begins to atrophy. You stop leveling it. You stop perking it. You become a master of summoning weapons you promised yourself you wouldn't need. The gameplay loop becomes seductive in its safety. You enter a room, you cast Muffle, Illusion, you cast Invisibility, Illusion, you reposition, you summon the bow, you fire, you vanish again, you're a ghost. It is a power fantasy, certainly, but it is not the fantasy of the Battlemage raining fire from the heavens. It is the fantasy of the assassin. You have become a member of the Dark Brotherhood in all but name, wearing the Archmage's robes as a disguise. Consider the kill cam difference. We talked about the Mage's kill cam being a document of their own death. The Archer's kill cam is a trophy. The camera follows the arrow in slow motion, soaring through the dark corridor, threading the needle between two pillars and striking the bandit right in the forehead. It is rewarding. It releases dopamine. The Destruction kill cam, where you just blast a guy and he ragdolls, lacks that precision. The game wants you to be an archer. It rewards you with better cinematography. But this safety comes at the cost of your identity. You start making excuses. I'm a witch hunter, you say, citing an old Oblivion class. I'm an arcane archer. But deep down you know the truth. You are hiding. You are hiding from the broken scaling of the destruction tree. You are hiding from the fact that on Master difficulty, a single fire rune won't kill a skeever, but a Daedric arrow will. The descent is also accelerated by the quiet casting perk's interaction with shouts. Once you have quiet casting, your shouts are also silent. You can use the throw voice shout to distract enemies, grouping them together. Then, instead of hitting them with a Master level firestorm, which takes 3 seconds to cast and leaves you vulnerable, you just pick them off one by one with the bow. The synergy of the stealth magic kit is perfect, far more perfect than the destruction restoration loop. Fans often debate whether the bound bow is cheating a pure mage run. Purists argue that because it uses the archery skill tree, it disqualifies you. Pragmatists argue that because it costs Magicka and comes from a spell tome, it is fair game. But regardless of the semantics, the result is the same. You are no longer casting spells at the enemy. You are shooting projectiles. The distinct flavour of the mage, the elemental rock, paper, scissors, the resource management, is gone. There is also the sensory betrayal of the sneak eye. As a mage, you should be looking at the world, the arcane symbols, the magicka swirling in the air. As a stealth archer, you spend 90% of your playtime staring at a crosshair and a slightly open eye icon in the centre of your screen. Is it open? Is it flat? Did they hear me? Your focus narrows. The grandeur of the world fades into a tactical assessment of sightlines and shadow levels. And let's be honest about the dragon fights. A pure mage fighting a dragon is a nightmare. The dragon flies around, you miss your firebolts, you run out of magicka, you wait, you hide. A bound bow, mage fighting a dragon is efficient. You lead the target, you puncture its wings, you feel effective. The game mechanics simply favour the bow. The hitboxes are generous, the range is infinite, and the damage is physical, which dragons are less resistant to than they are to fire or frost. Eventually you reach a point where you don't even bother summoning the bow anymore. You find a real Daedric bow with a chaos enchantment. You think, well, this saves me the cast time. You equip it. Then you equip some light armour because it helps my sneaking. And one day, you wake up in Riften, wearing a full set of nightingale armour, holding a dragonbone bow, and you realise you haven't cast a spell in 40 hours of gameplay. The robes are in a chest somewhere, the staff is sold, the magic is gone. The paper tiger didn't get tougher, it just changed its stripes. You survived Skyrim, but you failed the challenge. You let the harsh environment evolve you into a crab, armoured, hiding in a shell, snapping from the dark instead of the squishy, luminous jellyfish you were meant to be. The bound bow is the most efficient spell in the game, and that is exactly why it is the doom of the pure mage. It is the easy way out, and in Skyrim, the easy way out is always, always a stealth archer. If the bound bow is a seductive shortcut, the ward spell is a toll road that leads directly off a cliff. We move now from the offensive failures of the pure mage to the defensive catastrophe that is the magical shield. We have all been there, standing in the Hall of the Elements, listening to Tolfdir, that gentle, senile grandfather of the college, lecture us on safety. He asks you to cast a lesser ward so he can throw a fireball at you. You cast it. The fireball splashes harmlessly against your shimmering barrier. Tolfdir praises you. You feel safe. This is the most dangerous tutorial in the history of video games because it teaches you that wards work. In the wild, they absolutely do not. The uselessness of wards is the 6th nail in your coffin, and it largely comes down to a brutal economy of resources that the game refuses to balance. A physical shield, a plank of wood held by a bandit, costs 0 stamina to hold up. You can stand there all day behind a shield, blocking arrows and sword strikes, only spending stamina if you decide to bash someone or if you absorb a power attack. It is a passive, efficient defense. A ward, however, is a hungry beast. The moment you press the button to raise that magical barrier, your Magicka bar begins to hemorrhage. A base level lesser ward drains around 30 Magicka per second. That might not sound like much, but remember the combat regeneration penalty. You're essentially opening a vein in your arm to hold up a piece of glass. You're spending your ammunition to build a wall, leaving you with nothing to fire back with. The intended gameplay loop is that you raise the ward reactionarily. You see a spell coming, you block it, you drop the ward. But the game engine betrays you with charge-up time. A ward is not instant. When you press the button, the air shimmers, the sound swells, and the barrier takes about a full second to reach full strength. In the chaotic, lag-sensitive reality of a dragon fight, a 1-second delay is an eternity. If you try to flash your ward like a parry, the fireball will hit you while the ward is still forming. If you hold the ward up in anticipation, you run out of Magicka before the dragon breathes. You're trapped in a lose-lose scenario. Be too slow and burn, or be too cautious and run on empty. Then there is the shatter mechanic, a design choice seemingly implemented by someone who hates wizards. Every ward has a cap on how much damage it can absorb. If an incoming attack exceeds that cap, say, a Draugr Deathlord's Ebony Arrow or a high-level Ice Spike, the ward doesn't just fail to block the excess damage, it shatters. When a ward shatters, it staggers you. Let that sink in. If a warrior's shield takes a heavy hit, the warrior might lose some stamina, but they stay on their feet. If your ward breaks, the game actively punishes you by locking you into a stumble animation. You're stunned. Your hands drop. You're completely vulnerable to the next attack. The very tool you used to save yourself has turned you into a stationary target. It is the magical equivalent of your airbag going off and punching you in the face because you braked too hard. This fragility is best illustrated by the dragon breath attacks. Tolfdir's fireball was a single projectile. A dragon's breath is a continuous stream of particle effects dealing damage every millisecond. A standard ward cannot handle that throughput. You hold up your greater ward against an ancient dragon. The fire touches the shield. For 0.5 seconds it looks cool. Then, the damage threshold is exceeded. The ward shatters. You stagger. The dragon continues to breathe fire on you while you're stumbling. You die. From a lore perspective, the inefficiency of wards is a fascinating degradation of magical knowledge. In the Third Era, during the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, mages didn't use channeling wards. They used shield spells that were fire and forget. You cast a shield spell, it lasted for 60 seconds, and it simply boosted your armor rating. You could cast it and then fight with both hands. Somewhere in the 200 years between the Oblivion Crisis and the return of Alduin, the mages of Skyrim seemingly forgot how to create stable defensive fields and replaced them with these high-maintenance concentration-based barriers. Some scholars suggest this is due to the collapse of the Mages Guild and the loss of standardized magical education. The Synod and the College of Whispers hoarded the good spells, leaving the College of Winterhold with the scraps, unstable, Magicka-hungry barriers that require constant focus. You aren't learning the pinnacle of defense. You're using the magical equivalent of duct tape. The community has spent years trying to find a use for wards, and the debate almost always settles on one tragic conclusion. The only good ward is a Dwemer shield. We are talking, of course, about Spellbreaker. This unique artifact of Peryite is a heavy armor shield that casts a ward for free when you block. It creates a ward that costs 0 Magicka. It absorbs 50 points of spell damage. It refreshes instantly every time you lower and raise the shield. Spellbreaker proves that the mechanic of the ward itself isn't the problem. The cost is the problem. A warrior with Spellbreaker is the ultimate anti-mage. They can walk through fire, block shouts and laugh at lightning, all while keeping their stamina full. A pure mage with the greater ward spell is a sweating, panic-stricken mess who runs out of juice halfway through the fight. The fact that a shield, a physical slab of metal, is a better spellcasting tool than the actual spell is a damning indictment of the pure mage kit. There is one perk in the restoration tree that defenders of the faith will point to: Ward Absorb. This perk allows your ward to recharge your Magicka when it gets hit by a spell. In theory, this sounds amazing. You block a fireball, you get mana back, infinite energy, but in practice, it is clunky. To benefit from it, you have to successfully block the spell without the ward shattering. This means you need the high-level wards, Steadfast or Greater, which have higher base costs. So you're spending 50 Magicka, second, to potentially absorb 50 Magicka from a hit. it's a zero-sum game at best. And against physical attacks, arrows, swords, mud crabs, the ward offers practically zero protection and absorbs nothing. You're spending 50 Magicka second to block a rusty dagger, and you aren't getting anything back. The sensory experience of using a ward is also stressful. The sound design is a high-pitched, wavering hum that creates audio anxiety. It obscures your vision. The distortion effect in the centre of the ward blurs the enemy, making it harder to aim your own spells. You're essentially hiding behind a frosted glass window, hoping the bad man goes away. And let's talk about the shouts. A ward can theoretically block a shout like Unrelenting Force. If you time it perfectly, you can stop a Draugr Deathlord from ragdolling you across the room. This is the one pro move in the ward's repertoire. But if you miss the timing by a fraction of a second, you're flying through the air and your Magicka is gone. The risk-reward ratio is skewed heavily toward risk. Furthermore, wards are completely useless against the environmental hazards that plague mages. Traps. A swinging axe blade does not care about your ward. A falling rock does not care. A physical shield provides armor rating that mitigates this damage. A ward is spectral. It ignores physical force, mostly. You can walk into a trap with a ward up and die instantly. The obscure lore tidbit that really drives the point home comes from the book The Doors of Oblivion. It discusses the nature of Daedric pacts and the summoning of barriers. It implies that true protection requires a static anchor. By trying to anchor the barrier to your own moving mortal body through constant concentration, you are acting as a living conduit for kinetic energy. The feedback loop, the shatter, is the result of your own soul vibrating apart because it cannot disperse the impact. You're trying to be a wall, but you're made of meat. Compare this to the flesh spells, alteration. Iron Flesh, or Ebony Flesh, are fire and forget. You cast them, they last for 60 seconds, and they provide physical mitigation. They don't break, they don't stagger you, they don't drain your Magicka while they are active. They are superior in every way for general survival. So why do wards exist? They exist to trap new players. They exist to look cool in trailers. They exist to give enemy mages something to do so you can easily stagger them. Yes, when an enemy uses a ward, just hit them with a power attack or a dual cast spell. Their ward will shatter, they will stagger, and you can kill them. The weakness of the ward is your greatest weapon against enemy mages, which ironically proves why you should never use it yourself. There is a specific heartbreaking moment in the Labyrinthian questline. You face the skeletal dragon. It is surrounded by skeletons. You try to be the heroic mage. You stand your ground, raising greater ward to protect yourself from the frost breath. The breath hits, the Magicka bar vanishes, the ward breaks, you freeze. Meanwhile, Lydia runs up and bashes the dragon in the nose with a shield. She's fine. She's effective. You are a popsicle. The lesson is clear. Magic in Skyrim is best used for offense. For defense, the game mechanics heavily favor physical mitigation or evasion. The ward is a tool that demands everything. Your hand, your focus, your Magicka, and gives you a fragile, semi-transparent dinner plate in return. If you want to survive as a pure mage, unbind the ward spell from your favourites menu. Forget Tolfdir's advice. When you see a fireball coming, don't try to catch it. Step to the left. It's free, it's instant, and it doesn't shatter your dignity. Having discarded the useless safety of wards, the pure mage naturally looks to the pinnacle of their craft for salvation. They look to the master spells. These are the legendary incantations hidden behind high-level skill walls and complex quest lines, the spells that are supposed to justify the 90 hours you spent burning skeevers with a flamethrower. You expect a nuclear option. You expect to wave your hand and erase a city block. But what you get is a 3-second dance routine that leaves you paralysed, vulnerable, and statistically likely to be beaten to death by a mud crab before the casting animation finishes. This is the tragedy of the master spells, and it is the 7th reason you are failing. The journey to this disappointment begins with a rite of passage. Once your destruction skill reaches level 90 or 100, you approach Feralda at the college. She gives you the Destruction Ritual spell quest. You are tasked with taking the book Power of the Elements to various locations across Skyrim to unlock its secrets. It feels momentous. You are travelling to the Windward Ruins, absorbing the ancient echoes of magical power. You feel like a true wizard, unlocking the forbidden knowledge of the divines. You complete the quest. You receive Firestorm. The description is poetic. a 100-point fiery explosion centered on the caster. The damage number looks huge. You equip it. You equip Lightning Storm and Blizzard as well. You march into a bandit camp ready to unleash hell. You press the triggers. Instead of a spell firing, your character begins an elaborate slow-motion pirouette. Your hands glow. You raise them to the sky. You spin. You charge. The audio swells with a menacing hum. It looks undeniably cool, for exactly 1 second. Then you realize you cannot move. While you are performing this interpretive dance, the bandits are not impressed. They are not waiting for you to finish. They are running at you. And because Firestorm is centered on the caster, you have to be in melee range for it to hit them. You have voluntarily walked into the kill zone of a two-handed barbarian, wearing your bathrobe, and then rooted yourself in place to perform a 3-second wind-up animation. This is the tactical equivalent of pulling the pin on a grenade and then hugging the enemy before throwing it. The fragility of the pure mage makes these spells fundamentally suicidal. Remember, you have no armor. You rely on mobility and kiting to survive. Master spells remove your mobility entirely. You become a stationary turret made of glass. If a bandit power attacks you during the wind-up, one of two things happens. You die instantly, or you get staggered. If you get staggered, the spell cancels. The magicka you spent initiating it, often wasted. The time you spent charging it, gone. You have to start the animation all over again. Let's look specifically at Lightning Storm. This is the famous Kamehameha spell, a continuous beam of electrical destruction. It is visually one of the best things in the game, but once you fire it, your turning speed is capped. You turn with the grace of a rusted tank. If the enemy simply steps 2 feet to the left, you are left blasting a hole in the wall while they stab you in the kidney. It works great against dragons that are hovering in place, but against a sprinting saber cat, you are tracing a line of ozone in the dirt behind them as they close the distance to eat your face. Then there is Blizzard. This spell summons a chaotic ice storm around you. It sounds perfect for crowd control. However, there is a notorious quirk in the game's calculation, a piece of obscure lore that is actually a math bug. Blizzard's damage is calculated based on the caster's own resistances. If you are a Nord, or if you have high magic resistance, which you should as a mage, the spell often reduces its own damage output because it treats the storm as originating from you, but also interacting with you. In some unpatched versions, having high magic resistance makes Blizzard tickle the enemy rather than freeze them. You're literally resisting your own offense. But the core issue remains the wind-up. 3 seconds in Skyrim combat is a lifetime. A dragon can bite you twice in 3 seconds. A vampire can drain half your life in 3 seconds. The game is fast, chaotic, and brutal. The master spells are designed for a different game, a turn-based RPG where the wizard charges up in the back row while the knight protects them. But in Skyrim, you are the back row and the front line. There is no knight. There is just you and Lydia is currently stuck in a doorway 3 rooms back. The community has spent over a decade trying to make these spells viable, leading to the ethereal caster meta. This is the only way to safely use a master spell on higher difficulties. The strategy is 1. Shout Become Ethereal. You're now invincible, but cannot attack. 2. Begin casting the master spell. The casting animation does not break the ethereal state, only the release of the spell does. 3. Charge up safely while the bandit swings his axe through your ghostly body. 4. Release the spell just as ethereal fades. It works. It is clever. But it highlights the failure of the design. You have to use a dragon shout to patch the vulnerability of your magic. You're using the Thuum as a safety blanket because the School of Destruction failed to include a don't die while casting clause in the spell description. And since the shout has a cooldown, you can only pull this trick off once every minute or so. It's a once per encounter nuke, not a viable combat style. Historically, in the lore of the college, master spells were rituals performed by groups of wizards. The Augur of Dun Lane, that glowing ball of energy in the midden, was once a brilliant mage who sought power beyond his station. It is implied he dabbled in rituals that exceeded his solitary capacity. The fact that the Dragonborn can cast these spells alone is a testament to their demigod status. But the animation, the struggle, the charging, reflects the sheer weight of the magicka being manipulated. It is not meant to be easy. It is meant to be a channeling of pure, volatile creatia. However, Lore-accurate difficulty is not fun when you're reloading your save for the 10th time because an arrow interrupted your firestorm. There is also the DPS, damage per second, fallacy. Master spells deal a lot of damage in a single hit, or tick, but when you factor in the 3-second charge time, the fact that you can't move, and the recovery animation, the actual damage per second is often lower than simply dual casting Incinerate or Thunderbolt repeatedly. With Incinerate, expert level, you can snapcast, you can move, you can jump, you can trigger the impact perk, Stagger, with every dual cast. Master spells, generally, do not trigger the impact stagger on the initial hit in the same reliable way, or if they do, the wind-up makes the stagger irrelevant because the enemy has already hit you. So, the optimal playstyle, the meter, is to ignore the master spells entirely. You do the quest to get the book because it looks good on your shelf. You learn the spell to complete your collection, but when you go to fight Karstag or the Ebony Warrior, you don't use Firestorm, you use the expert spells. You stick to the mid-tier magic because it is fast, mobile, and safe. This creates a sense of anticlimax for the pure mage. You reach level 100, you are the Archmage, and your best attack is the same one you were using at level 60. You have plateaued. The game offers you a shiny new toy, but the toy is made of lead and glued to the floor. Consider the visual clutter as well. Firestorm fills the screen with explosions. It blinds you. If you didn't kill everything in that one blast, and on legendary difficulty you definitely didn't, you are now standing in a cloud of smoke, disoriented with angry, half-health enemies surrounding you. You can't see them to target your next spell. You have effectively flash-banged yourself. The Illusion Master spells are slightly better. Mayhem causes chaos in a massive radius, but they suffer the same wind-up flaw. You have to stand in the middle of a dungeon and pray nobody sees you for 4 seconds while you wave your hands. If they do see you, you are dead. If you're sneaking, the casting noise often alerts them before the spell goes off. The Restoration Master spell, Guardian Circle, is arguably the most useful, but only because it creates a zone of healing that allows you to stand still. It encourages the turret playstyle, but again, it requires you to hunker down. In a game about exploration and movement, master spells force you to stop. They turn the Dragonborn into a piece of furniture. There is a tragic comedy in watching a new player try to use Lightning Storm against a dragon. The dragon lands. The player beams with excitement. "Eat this, Alduin!" They start the charge. Alduin shouts, "Fuzroda." The player goes flying off the throat of the world before the beam even appears. The spell did 0 damage. The Magicka is gone. The player is ragdolling down the mountain. It is a harsh lesson in action economy. In the time it took you to prepare to be awesome, the enemy was awesome. The master spells are a trap for the vanity of the mage. They promise the power of a god, but they deliver the mobility of a tree. They are the ultimate expression of the paper tiger paradox. Huge potential destructive power packaged in a delivery system so fragile that it shatters under the slightest pressure. So, keep the Power of the Elements book on your shelf. Admire the animations in the safety of your home. But when you descend into the dark places of the world, stick to the spells that let you move your feet. Because a wizard who stands still is not a master of the arcane, they are just a very flashy target. We have spent a considerable amount of time dismantling the vanity of the robe-wearing wizard. We have exposed their fragility, their resource dependency, and their reliance on panic-inducing mechanics. Now we must turn our eyes to history, specifically the military history of the Septim Empire, to understand why the pure mage is not just a tactical failure, but a historical anomaly. The solution to your squishiness has been staring you in the face since the character creation screen clad in steel and discipline. We're talking about the Imperial Battlemage Superiority. The modern Skyrim player often operates under a delusion carried over from other fantasy franchises, the idea that metal interferes with magic. In Dungeons & Dragons, a wizard in plate mail cannot cast spells. In The Elder Scrolls IV: Oblivion, wearing armor applied a spell effectiveness penalty, meaning your fireballs were literally weaker because you were wearing greaves. But in Skyrim, that penalty is gone. It does not exist. Read that again. The game engine applies 0 penalty to your spell magnitude, duration or cost for wearing a full set of Daedric armor. You can be encased in 300 pounds of demon-forged ebony, looking like a walking fortress, and your Incinerate spell will hit just as hard as the naked guy standing next to you. This is the game whispering. No, screaming the truth. The pure mage is a self-imposed handicap. The intended, optimized class for a magic user in the 4th era is the Battlemage. Loremasters will recognize this as a return to form for the Empire. The Imperial Legion did not conquer Tamriel by sending wave after wave of guys in bathrobes to throw sparks at the enemy. They conquered the continent with the Shadow Legion. These were the elite Imperial Battlemages, a specialized unit that combined the discipline of the soldier with the devastation of the wizard. They were trained in the Battlespire, a magical academy floating in the slipstream between Mundus and Oblivion. The Shadow Legion did not wear cloth. They wore the Imperial Battlemage uniform, a heavy imposing set of armour with a distinct hood and helm combination. They understood that on a battlefield, stray arrows and shrapnel are everywhere. A dead wizard casts no spells, therefore armour is not an option. It is a requirement of the job. By refusing to wear heavy armour, you're essentially role-playing a civilian academic rather than a combatant. You're mimicking the scholars of the College of Winterhold, who spend their days staring at artifacts, rather than the war mages of the Legion who spend their days turning rebels into ash. Let's look at the mechanics of the heavy armour skill tree, specifically how it synergizes with the Magicka-hungry playstyle. The common argument against armour is weight. I can't carry loot if my armour weighs 50 pounds, the pure mage whines. I run out of stamina too fast. Enter the conditioning perk. Available at heavy armour level 70, this perk makes worn heavy armour weigh nothing. 0. It also removes the movement speed penalty. Once you have this perk, you're just as fast as a thief in leather. You're just as agile as a mage in robes, but you have an armour rating of 600. This perk fundamentally invalidates the existence of robes. If your armour weighs nothing, and it doesn't slow you down, and it doesn't weaken your spells, the only reason to wear robes is the pre-enchanted Magicka Regeneration. But as we established in Section 3, you should be enchanting your own gear anyway. So, the optimised loadout is a set of dragon plate armour, enchanted with Fortify Destruction and Fortify Magicka, worn by a mage with the conditioning perk. You're a tank that shoots lightning. You're an Abrams with a spellbook. There is also a profound economic efficiency to the Battlemage build. The pure mage, as we discussed, must cast Ebony Flesh at the start of every fight. Ebony Flesh costs a significant chunk of Magicka, often around 60-80 points depending on your skill. That is Magicka you cannot use to attack. It is a survival tax. The Battlemage pays no tax, their armour is always on. They walk into the fight with their protection active. They can use that initial 80 Magicka to launch a fireball immediately. While the pure mage is busy buffing themselves so they don't die from a stiff breeze, the Battlemage has already killed the first target. This leads to the Dragon Priest Mask dilemma, which we will cover in detail next, but the precursor is here, the aesthetic of the armoured face. The pure mage wants to see their character's face framed by a hood. The Battlemage accepts the anonymity of the helmet. There is a fantastic piece of obscure lore regarding the Battlemage Zurin Arctus, the Underking. He was the personal Battlemage of Tiber Septim. Arctus is often depicted as a figure of immense, terrifying power. He was not a fragile scholar. He was a force of nature who could stand toe-to-toe with the Numidium, a giant brass god robot. Do you think Zurin Arctus wore a robe? No. The depictions of the Imperial Battlemage class in earlier games like Arena and Daggerfall always showed them armoured. The robe-only wizard is a relatively modern deviation in the mindset of the player base, likely influenced by cinematic tropes from other media, like Lord of the Rings, which do not apply to the brutal pragmatism of Nirn. The community often debates the alteration versus armour investment, but I have to spend perks in heavy armour, the naysayer cries. That wastes points I could put into magic. Counterpoint, the alteration tree requires a massive perk investment to make robes viable. You need mage armour, or 3 ranks, to triple the effectiveness of flesh spells. You need stability to make them last longer. You need magic resistance because you have no physical buffer. You are spending 5 and 7 perks just to achieve the same damage mitigation that a guy in Orcish armour gets for free by just existing. Heavy armour requires fewer perks to be good enough. You take Juggernaut team at 1 rank is often enough early on, well fitted and Tower of Strength. You let the skill level up naturally by getting hit. You're investing in a passive survival mechanic rather than an active one. There is also the stagger resistance factor. The The Tower of Strength perk in the heavy armor tree reduces stagger by 50%. This is crucial for a mage. If you are charging a spell and you get hit by an arrow, you might flinch, interrupting your cast. A Battlemage in full plate with high stagger resistance ignores the arrow. They tank the hit, finish the cast, and vaporize the archer. The armor doesn't just protect your health, it protects your offensive cadence. The visual storytelling of the Battlemage is also far more compelling in the context of being the Dragonborn. You are the slayer of dragons. You devour their souls. Does it make sense for a demigod of war to dress like a librarian? Or does it make sense for them to wear the bones of their enemies? Dragonplate armor is literally made from the corpses of the dragons you have slain. A pure mage sells the dragon bones to Belethor for pocket change. A Battlemage forges them into a cuirass. Wearing the bones of a dragon you killed is the ultimate power move. It signals to every other dragon, I am the predator here. Wearing blue cloth signals, I am a delicious soft treat. Furthermore, the Battlemage has access to the shield, a real shield, not a ward. We discussed the superiority of Spellbreaker, but even a standard glass shield is a lifesaver. You can hold a spell in your right hand and a shield in your left. This spell sword or tank mage hybrid is incredibly resilient. You can block the unexpected bear lunge, then burn the bear. The pure mage has no left-hand option that provides 100% physical blockage. The only downside to the heavy armor route is the early game. Before you get the conditioning perk, the armor is heavy. You move slower. You have less inventory space. This is the training montage period. You're trudging through the snow, sweating, building the muscle mass required to be a god. The pure mage has it easy in the beginning. Light robes, fast movement. But the pure mage hits a ceiling. The Battlemage breaks through it. There is a popular fan theory that the decline of magic in the 4th era, the fact that we don't see levitation or complex spell making anymore, is tied to the physical degeneration of mages. In the past, mages were hearty explorers and warriors. Think of the Sidekick monks or the Telvanni wizard lords. The modern college mage is physically weak, sequestered in a tower, afraid of the world. By becoming a battle mage, you are rejecting this decline. You are embracing the old ways of the Needs and the Atmarans who respected strength above all. Consider the vigilance of Stendarr. You see them walking the roads. They are mage hunters. They use restoration and alteration, but they wear heavy boots and heavy gauntlets with their robes. They are halfway there. They understand that hands and feet need protection, but they stop halfway, and that is why you usually find them dead in a vampire lair. They didn't commit to the cuirass. The most damning evidence for Battlemage superiority comes from the highest level enemies in the game. Look at the Ebony Warrior. He is the final challenge for the player who has done everything. He uses the Thuum. He casts spells. He has magical resistances. Does he wear robes? No. He wears a fully enchanted set of ebony armor. The game's ultimate NPC, the design intended to test the limits of your power, is a battle mage. He is what you should aspire to be. He is the developers telling you, this is what peak performance looks like. He doesn't kite you. He doesn't hide. He walks toward you, tanking your damage, and reflects it back. If the Ebony Warrior wore robes, the fight would last 10 seconds. Because he wears armor, it is a duel of legends. So, cast aside the blue linen. It is a symbol of the college's impotence. Go to the forge, smell the smoke, hammer out a set of steel or dwarf metal or Daedric hearts, enchant it with the fires of your destruction. When you walk into a dungeon, let the enemies hear the clank of your sabatons. Let them know that you didn't just come to read books at them, you came to conquer. The pure mage floats like a butterfly and dies like a bug on a windshield. The Imperial Battlemage rolls like a tank and conquers like an emperor. The choice is yours, but the history of Tamriel has already cast its vote. Even if you stubbornly reject the wisdom of the Imperial Battlemage, if you cling to your robes like a toddler clinging to a security blanket, the game has one final, cruel joke to play on your vanity. You want to be the ultimate wizard. You want the highest Magicka pool, the fastest regeneration, and the most potent cost reductions. You scour the loot tables, you consult the wikis, and you inevitably arrive at the same conclusion as every other power-hungry caster in history. To optimize your magic, you must wear the face of a dead lich. This is the Dragon Priest Mask dilemma, and it is the 9th reason your pure mage identity is doomed to fail. The dilemma is simple. The single best slot efficiency items for mages in Skyrim are the masks worn by the ancient undead dragon priests. These masks offer enchantments that far outstrip almost any standard circlet or hood you can find in the wild. But there is a catch. Most of them are classified as armour. Let's start with the most egregious offender, Morocke. You finish the College of Winterhold questline. You have saved the world from Mancano's tampering with the Eye of Magnus. You are named Archmage. You are given the Archmage's robes, which we have already established are mediocre, and you loot the mask of Morocke from the ashes of the Labyrinthian. The mask is beautiful in a terrifying Geiger-esque sort of way, a bluish-grey metal visage that radiates power. Its enchantment is legendary, 100% Magicka Regeneration. Perfect, you think. This completes my build. You put it on, and instantly, your ebony flesh spell becomes useless. Why? Because Morocke is classified as light armour. If you have invested in the Alteration Tree's Mage Armour perk, the one perk that makes wearing robes viable by tripling your flesh spell's armour rating, that perk has a strict condition. You must be wearing no armour, not a single piece. The moment you equip Morocke, the game detects a piece of light armour. The Mage Armour multiplier shuts off. Your 300 armour rating drops to a pathetic 100 plus the mask's base armour. You're effectively punished for using the reward of your own guild's questline. The game hands you the crown of the mage, and wearing it breaks your magical defense. This forces a choice. Do you abandon the Mage Armour perk and admit that the pure mage defensive scheme is flawed? Or do you put Morocke in a chest and wear a weaker generic hood just to keep your roleplay alive? Most players choose the power. They equip the mask, and in doing so they take the first step away from the pure mage and toward the armoured caster. But Morocke is just the gateway drug. The true temptation awaits at Skuldafn, the temple you visit just before entering Sovngarde. Here you meet the priest Nakreen. Nakreen's mask is a thing of beauty for a destruction mage. It grants plus 150 magicka and, crucially, reduces the cost of destruction and restoration spells by 20%. It is arguably the best offensive headgear in the base game. It allows for that sweet, sweet cost reduction we discussed earlier, but Nakreen is heavy armour. Now the transformation is undeniable. You're wearing a heavy metal helmet. It weighs roughly the same as an iron pot. If you wear this with your blue robes, you look ridiculous. A wizard in a dress with a tank's turret for a head. But the stats are too good to ignore. You wear it. And once you're wearing a heavy armour helmet, you might as well wear the gauntlets to match, right? And maybe the boots. The slope is slippery, and it is paved with optimization. The aesthetic tragedy of the Dragon Priest masks cannot be overstated. Skyrim is a game about facial customization. You spend hours tweaking your nose ridge, your war paint, and your eye colour. You want to see your character's expressions. The pure mage archetype usually involves a hood that shadows the face but still reveals the beard or the eyes. The Dragon Priest masks erase you. When you equip one, your face is gone. You're replaced by a static, emotionless metal stare. You look like a bug. You look like a monster. In cutscenes or kill cams, you don't look like a hero saving the world. You look like one of the dungeon bosses you just killed. This leads to a profound disconnect in the roleplay. You are the Dragonborn, the saviour of the people. Yet you walk into Whiterun wearing the visage of the ancient tyrants who enslaved the Nords. Imagine the average citizen's reaction. You are wearing the face of the cult that sacrificed their ancestors. It's like walking into a church wearing a demon costume. The guards might say, "Is that fur coming out of your ears?" But they should be screaming in terror. The lore behind these masks deepens the dilemma. These aren't just helmets, they are badges of office for the highest-ranking members of the dragon cult. Each mask is unique to its priest. By wearing Morocke, glorious, or Volsung, horror, you're essentially claiming their title. There is a disturbing implication in the text, the Dragon War. The priests were granted these masks by the dragons themselves, likely infused with a fraction of the dragon's own power. Some fan theories suggest that the masks are semi-sentient, or at least corrupting. By wearing one, are you channeling the priest's power, or is the priest's memory influencing you? Is the reason you become a cold, calculating murder hobo because you are looking through the eyes of an immortal lich? The community has long debated the Conoric endgame. If you collect all 8 masks from the base game, travel to the Labyrinthian, and use the wooden mask to travel back in time, a casual bit of time travel the game barely explains, you can unlock the final mask, Conoric. Conoric, Warlord, is the ultimate prize. Its enchantment is unique. When you are low on health, it has a chance to knock back enemies, heal you fully, and summon a spectral dragon priest to fight for you. It is a defensive powerhouse, but Connachric is heavy armor. And its effect, getting hit to trigger a heal, encourages a tank playstyle. It encourages you to get into the fray, take damage, and let the mask save you. This is the antithesis of the don't get hit pure mage philosophy. The ultimate artifact for the mask-collecting wizard turns you into a heavy armor juggernaut who relies on being beaten up to activate their powers. Furthermore, the spectral dragon priest that Connachric summons uses, you guessed it, destruction spells. Often, he uses them better than you do. He summons Storm Atronachs. He uses Thunderbolt. It is a humbling moment when your own hat summons a guy who is better at magic than you are. The dilemma forces a hard realization. The developers did not design the pure mage to be the pinnacle of power. They designed the dragon priest to be the pinnacle. The highest tier magic users in the game lore, the ones who achieved immortality and bound their souls to their bodies, are all armoured. They all wear masks. They all carry staves. Azidal, Dukan and Zakrisos, the three acolytes found in the Dragonborn DLC on Solstheim, reinforce this. Their masks are arguably even better for specialised builds. Azidal increases fire damage by 25% and gives 50% fire resistance. Dukan does the same for frost and Zakrisos for shock. These are massive damage boosters. A 25% increase in damage is distinct from the cost reduction we usually chase. It actually makes your spells hit harder, which is rare in Skyrim. If you want to be a pyromancer, you need Azidal's mask. But again, they are heavy armor. So, the pyromancer who refuses to wear heavy armor is voluntarily doing 25% less damage than the pyromancer who accepts the mask. You are capping your own potential for the sake of a piece of cloth. There is a workaround, of course. The classic circlet glitch, specifically with the Falmer helmet in earlier patches, or using mods to make masks clothing. But in the vanilla game intended by the developers, you're forced to choose style or power. And let's be honest, the style of the default hoods is questionable too. The novice hood looks like a sock. The adept hood is okay. The apprentice hood looks like a leather aviator cap gone wrong. The dragon priest mask, for all its creepy bug-eyed malice, commands respect. It has a silhouette that says, "I have conquered the endgame." There is a specific interaction with the Archmage's robes that makes this even more painful. The robes have a hood attached. You cannot wear the robes and a dragon priest mask at the same time, unless you use the glitchy, hoodless version of the robes, which is sometimes unobtainable without console commands. So, to wear Moroki, the mask you got during the quest to get the robes, you have to take off the robes. The game gives you two items that are thematically linked, the robes of the Archmage and the mask of the Labyrinthian, and physically prevents you from wearing them together. It is a design conflict that screams, "We don't know what we want you to be." This usually leads to the mismatched hobo phase of the mage's life. You wear the Moroki mask, a set of ebony armour, because you gave up on mage armour, and maybe some Thalmor gloves you found. You look like a scavenger. The elegance of the pure mage is gone. You're just a collection of stat blocks taped together. The psychological effect of the mask also changes how you play. When you can see your face, you feel human. You feel vulnerable. When you wear the mask, you feel robotic. The dehumanization makes you bolder. You start tanking hits you shouldn't. You start wading into dragonfire because, hey, I'm Connachric now. And perhaps that is the point. Perhaps the failing of the pure mage is that it tries to remain human in a world of monsters. The dragon priests understood that to wield the ultimate power, you have to give up your humanity. You have to cover your face, bind your soul, and become something harder, colder, and more durable. By refusing the mask, you are clinging to a mortal fragility that simply cannot hold the voltage of the Aetherius. By accepting the mask, you survive, but you cease to be the wizard you imagined. You become something else. Something ancient. Something armoured. So, look at Moroki in your inventory. Look at that 100% regen. Look at that light armour rating. Put it on. Watch your mage armour perk turn grey in the menu. And accept that the price of unlimited power is looking like a gargoyle for the rest of your playthrough. We have stripped away your robes, handed you a shield, and covered your face with an ancient mask. But perhaps you are still failing. Perhaps the mortal coil itself is the limitation. If you truly wish to transcend the mediocrity of the standard mage build, you must look beyond the living. You must look to the darkness. you must embrace the most broken, mathematically nonsensical interaction in the entire game, the Necromage Vampire. This is the Necromage Vampire meta, and it is the 10th reason why playing as a breathing, pulse-having pure mage is an exercise in futility. The mechanics of this build hinge on a single perk, deep in the restoration tree called Necromage. The description reads, "All spells are more effective against undead." On the surface, this seems like a niche tool for paladins hunting Draugr in dusty crypts. It sounds like something a Vigilant of Stendarr would take. But here is the twist that defines the meta. If you contract vampirism, your character becomes undead. The game tags you with the undead keyword. Therefore, you are now a valid target for the Necromage perk. This means that every single spell, enchantment, and active effect you cast on yourself is treated as cast against an undead target. Consequently, everything you do to yourself is 25% stronger and lasts 50% longer. Let that sink in. The pure mage casts Ebony Flesh and gets 300 armor for 60 seconds. The Necromage Vampire casts Ebony Flesh and gets 375 armor for 90 seconds. The pure mage enchants a ring with Fortified Destruction. It gives 25% reduction. The Necromage Vampire puts on that same ring, and the game buffs the enchantment because it is being applied to an undead body. It effectively becomes 31 to 32% reduction. You're statistically superior to a mortal in every conceivable metric simply by being a corpse. This synergy allows you to break the caps the developers intended to set. Consider the spell absorption mechanic. The Atronach stone gives you 50% spell absorption. The Atronach perk in the alteration tree gives you 30%. That is 80% total. You still take damage from 20% of spells. But if you are a Necromage Vampire, the Atronach Stone's 50% is multiplied by 1.25, becoming 62.5%. The Atronach Perk's 30% becomes 37.5%. Add those together, you have reached 100% spell absorption. You are now immune to magic, not highly resistant. Immune. Dragon fire, lightning bolts, frostbite, rune traps. They simply vanish when they hit you, refilling your Magicka bar in the process. You can stand in a stream of legendary dragon fire and laugh, your blue bar staying full, your health bar untouched. The Mortal Mage cannot do this. The Mortal Mage is capped at 85% resistance, the hard cap for resistance, which still lets damage through. The Vampire creates a mathematical void where damage ceases to exist. This creates a fundamental disparity in viability. The Pure Mage struggles to survive, the Necromage Vampire struggles to find a challenge. The fragility of the cloth build is erased not by armor, but by the sheer overwhelming force of multiplied enchantments. Your health regeneration enchantments work better. Your carry weight buffs are stronger. Even your shouts, like Elemental Fury or Become Ethereal, last longer because they are technically magic effects applied to your undead self. The lore implications of this are delicious and deeply ironic. Restoration is typically the school of the divines, specifically Arkay, the god of life and death. Arkay hates necromancy. He hates undead. The fact that a vampire, a creature of Molag Bal, the Prince of Domination, uses Arkay's own holy magic to make their curse stronger is a blasphemy of the highest order. You are hacking the divine laws of Aetherius to supercharge your unholy existence. Some lore masters argue this wasn't a glitch, but a reflection of the dominating nature of the vampire. Vampires in The Elder Scrolls grow stronger as they age and refine their blood. By mastering restoration, the manipulation of life forces, the vampire learns to perfectly sustain their own animated corpse, pushing it beyond the limits of natural decay. But let's talk about the specific pure mage failing here, the refusal to turn. Many players role-playing a good wizard avoid vampirism. They want to be Merlin, not Dracula. They cure the disease as soon as they see Sanguinar Vampiris in their active effects. By curing yourself, you are voluntarily debuffing your character. You are saying, I prefer my enchantments to be weak. The pure mage also suffers from the downside of not having a panic button. We discussed the master spells and their long wind-ups. If a mortal mage gets cornered, they die. If a vampire mage gets cornered, they have the Vampire Lord form. While the Necromage synergy focuses on the humanoid form, the ability to transform into a floating, clawed gargoyle demon offers a second health bar and a completely different movement set. The Vampire Lord can hover over water, it can mist form to escape, It has a telekinetic grip that can throw giants off cliffs. It is a get-out-of-jail-free card that the Mortal Mage lacks. The community has dissected this build for years, and it remains the gold standard for min-maxing. It turns the Paper Tiger into a titanium ghost. The only downsides are the weakness to fire and the stunt in stats during sunlight. However, the weakness to fire is a joke to the Necromage. Because your resist fire enchantments on your boots are also buffed by 25%, you can easily overcap your resistance to negate the vampire penalty entirely. You're a vampire who can tan in a volcano. And the sunlight penalty? It stops Magicka Regeneration. But as we established in Section 3, the optimized mage uses 100% cost reduction gear, which is easier to achieve with Necromage buffs. If your spells cost 0, you don't need regeneration. The sun can shine all it wants. Your fireballs are free. There is also the Dual Flurry interaction for those playing a Spellsword hybrid. The perk Dual Flurry increases attack speed. Necromage buffs this effect on yourself. You swing weapons faster than the game animation can sometimes handle. You become a blur of violence. But sticking to the pure mage casting archetype, the most potent benefit is the illusion synergy. Vampires naturally get a bonus to illusion spells. Add the Necromage buff to your illusion perks. Your Pacify and Frenzy spells now work on enemies with much higher level caps. The Mortal Mage casts Mayhem in a high level bandit camp, and half the enemies resist it because they are too high level. The Necromage Vampire casts Mayhem, and even the bandit chiefs start killing each other. You become the true puppet master. You control the battlefield in a way the living cannot, simply because your mind magic is powered by the blood of ancients. This leads to a distinct psychological shift in gameplay. The Mortal Mage is reactive, dodging, shielding, panicking. The Necromage Vampire is arrogant. You walk slowly. You don't crouch. You know that if they hit you, your buff to Oblivion Ebony Flesh will absorb it. If they cast at you, your Atronach absorption will eat it. You're playing a horror movie villain, and the bandits are the teenagers. The visual component of vampirism also arguably fits the high-level wizard aesthetic better than the standard race. The glowing eyes, the pale skin, it looks arcane. It looks like you have spent centuries in a library studying forbidden texts, which you probably have. The standard, healthy Nord wizard looks too rustic, too alive. There is a fantastic, obscure detail regarding the blood of the Ancients effect from the Dawnguard DLC. If you drink from the Chalice of Bloodstone, your Vampiric Drain spell absorbs magicka and stamina, as well as health. Combined with Necromage, this drain becomes a fire hose of resources. You can face tank a dragon, draining its life to refill your own, while draining its magicka so it can't shout. It is a level of sustainability that the recovery perks in the restoration tree can never match. Furthermore, the pure mage who refuses vampirism misses out on the undead healing mechanic. A mortal heals with close wounds. A vampire can heal with necromantic healing, sold by rebels in the Soul Cairn. But due to Necromage, standard potions and effects can be manipulated to be incredibly potent. Let's not forget the crafting loop. Since Necromage boosts the Fortify Alchemy enchantments on your gear, your potions are stronger. Stronger potions mean stronger Fortify enchanting potions. Stronger enchanting potions mean stronger gear. It is a positive feedback loop that spirals your power level into the stratosphere much faster than a mortal can achieve. The tragedy of the pure mage is that they are playing by the rules of the living in a world that rewards the dead. You're trying to be a hero in the classic sense, a warm-blooded champion. But Skyrim is a harsh, cold land. It respects the Draugr. It respects the dragon priest. It respects the vampire. By remaining mortal, you're accepting the default settings of the universe. You're accepting that gravity applies to you, that fire hurts you, and that your spells have limits. The vampire accepts none of this. So when you are lying on the floor of a cave watching the load last save screen because a Failma arrow one-shot you through your robes, ask yourself, is your pulse worth it? Is seeing the sun worth being weak? Go to Morthal, find Movarth's lair. Let one of the fledglings hit you a few times until the screen blurs red. Sleep for 3 days, and wake up as the apex predator of magic. The pure mage is a fragile concept. The undead archmage is an eternal reality. We have discussed your gear, your spells, and your undead aspirations. But now we must address the social dynamic of your failure. Specifically, we need to talk about the person standing in the doorway, blocking your retreat while you frantically try to cast a frost rune. You are the Dragonborn. You have the soul of a Dover. You are the chosen one of Akatosh. And yet, if you are playing a pure mage on any difficulty higher than Adept, you are functionally living as a sidekick to your own housecarl. This is the living as a follower's sidekick reality, and it is the 11th reason your build is a humiliation. The dynamic is established early. You kill the first dragon at the watchtower, likely by hiding in the tower and letting the guards do the work, and Jarl Balgruuf assigns Lydia to your service. "I am your sword and your shield," she says. For a warrior, Lydia is a pack mule. For a stealth archer, she's a liability who ruins sneak attacks. But for the pure mage in robes, Lydia is the only reason you are still alive. She wears steel plate, you wear a bathrobe, she has a shield, you have a fragile ego. The tactical necessity dictates that she goes first. You enter a dungeon, you stand back. Lydia charges in, shouting, "Skyrim belongs to the Nords!" She engages the Draugr Deathlord. She takes the hits. She draws the aggro. And what are you doing? You're standing 15 feet back, hands glowing yellow, spraying a beam of healing hands into her back. Look at yourself. You aren't the hero. You are the medic. You are the NPC healer keeping the actual main character alive. The game has inverted the roles. Lydia is the one cleaving through the undead legions. You are just the battery pack making sure she doesn't fall down. You have essentially become a restoration staff with legs. This dependency ruins the power fantasy of the Destruction Mage. You want to cast Fireball, you want to unleash the Inferno, but you can't. Why? Because Lydia is in the way. This brings us to the friendly fire nightmare. In Skyrim, Area of Effect, AoE spells do not discriminate. If you cast Fireball into a melee scrum, you are hitting the Draugr for 40 damage and Lydia for 40 damage. Here is the core in-game fact that haunts every mage. Followers in Skyrim are generally marked as protected. This means that when their health reaches 0 from enemy attacks, they don't die. They fall to one knee and enter a bleed-out state. Enemies will stop attacking them and switch targets to you. However, the protected status has one fatal loophole. The player. If you deal the final point of damage to a follower while they are kneeling, or even while they're fighting, they die. Permanently. This means you are the greatest threat to your own bodyguard. You are terrified of using your best spells, Ice Storm, Chain Lightning, Fireball, because the splash damage will kill the only thing standing between you and a quick death. So, you're forced to use single target spells like Firebolt, carefully aiming over Lydia's shoulder like a nervous photographer, or you revert to the Healing Hands beam. You're not conquering the dungeon, you are managing a workplace safety hazard. The AI of followers further compounds the misery of the pure mage. The doorway block is a rite of passage. As a robe wearer, your primary survival mechanic is kiting, running away while shooting backward. You open a door, trigger a trap or a boss, and turn to run. Lydia is standing there. She looks at you. "Honoured to see you again, my Thane." She does not move. The boss hits you. You die. A warrior can shove past her. A mage with 0 physical mass and low stamina often gets stuck on her collision box. You are trapped by your own meat shield. Then there is the issue of stealth. We discussed the descent into the stealth archer earlier, but if you try to be a stealth mage with a follower, you are doomed. You're wearing muffled boots. You're invisible. You creep past the sleeping bear. Lydia, wearing heavy steel boots, stomps onto a pile of bones. The bear wakes up. Lydia draws her sword and screams. Your stealth plan evaporates. You are forced into open combat, which, as a pure mage, is your fail state. The community has debated the best follower for a mage for over a decade. The consensus usually lands on other mages, like J'zargo or Mercurio, or the essential vampire Serana. J'zargo, the Khajiit student at the college, is a fan favourite because he levels indefinitely with the player. However, he has a notorious quirk. He favours using sparks, the lowest level shock spell, even at level 80. You are the Archmage, and your apprentice is trying to tickle a legendary dragon to death with static electricity. It's embarrassing. Then there is Serana, the daughter of Coldharbour. She is essential, meaning she cannot die. This solves the friendly fire issue. You can nuke her all day and she just complains. But Serana brings her own chaos. Necromancy. She has a habit of raising the most useless corpses available. You are fighting an ebony warrior. You need help. You look at Serana. She has resurrected a chicken or a goat. That's your army, Serana, a zombie goat. Meanwhile, her ice spike spells often hit you in the back, leaving a giant icicle protruding from your kidney for the next 20 minutes. It ruins the cutscenes. There is also a deep irony in the Barbus quest. For a brief time, you can have a talking dog follower who is literally invincible. Many pure mages deliberately never finish the quest, a Daedra's best friend, just so they can keep Barbus as a tank. Think about that. The mighty wizard, master of the arcane, relies on a dog to fight his battles. You stand behind the dog kills the vampires, you loot the bodies. If Clavicus Vile could see you, he wouldn't even offer you a deal, he'd just laugh. The lore of the housecarl implies a sworn protector, a bodyguard for a Thane. But historically, Thanes were warrior lords. They fought with their housecarls, shield wall to shield wall. The Nords of old didn't have a concept of the backline squishy caster. In the Atmaran Wars, the clever men, magic users, were terrifying combatants, often described as being wreathed in frost and storm, wading into the fray. By hiding behind Lydia, you're violating the spirit of Nordic combat. You're treating her like a summon, a disposable Atronach made of flesh and bad pathfinding code. And speaking of Atronachs, the pure mage often tries to replace the follower with conjuration to avoid the AI headache. I'll just summon a Dremora Lord, you say. This works better. The Dremora Lord shouts, "I smell weakness," and decapitates things. But notice the psychological shift. You are still the sidekick. The Dremora is doing the cool stuff. You are just the guy who blew the whistle to call him onto the field. You aren't fighting, you are management. There is a specific, obscure interaction with the Call to Arms illusion spell that highlights the absurdity of the follower dynamic. This master-level spell buffs the combat skills, health, and stamina of your allies. So, the ultimate expression of the illusionist is to make Lydia a god. You cast the spell. She glows. She becomes a whirlwind of death. You just watch. You have invested 100 levels into a skill tree to make someone else play the game for you. You're effectively the coach shouting from the sidelines. The dependency becomes most glaring when the game forces you to be alone. The quest, diplomatic immunity, strips you of your gear, mostly, and your follower. You're inside the Thalmor embassy, just you and your robes. Panic sets in. Without Lydia to take the hits, the Thalmor wizards shred you. You realise that you never actually learned how to dodge. You never learned how to manage spacing. You only learned how to heal the person who was doing those things. Or consider the Apocrypha sections of the Dragonborn DLC. Lydia cannot follow you into the Black Books. You are alone in the realm of Hermaeus Mora. Seekers and lurkers are everywhere. They hit hard. You find yourself running in circles, jumping on tentacles, desperate for a meat shield that isn't there. The pure mage falls apart when isolated because it is a build designed for support, not for dueling. Eventually you might try the Dead Thrall spell. You kill a powerful bandit chief, reanimate him permanently, and use him as a zombie tank. This is the peak of the sidekick meta. You are literally dragging a dead body around to protect you. You have to groan every time he gets stuck on a rock. You have to listen to his mindless moaning. Ah! It's like babysitting a drunk friend who also happens to be a rotting corpse, but you do it. Because if you let him turn to ash, the next arrow is coming for you. So look at your follower. Look at the burden they carry. Literally, they are carrying all your dragon bones because you have no stamina. Look at how they charge into fire while you cower. Admit it. You aren't the main character. Lydia is the Dragonborn. You're just her eccentric, magical biographer who occasionally heals her boo-boos. If relying on a heavily armoured babysitter wasn't damaging enough to your ego, we must now examine the way the pure mage perverts the sacred art of the Thu'um. The dragon shouts are the birthright of the Dovahkiin. They are tonal architecture, the ability to rewrite reality by speaking the language of the universe's creation. They are meant to be weapons of mass destruction. But you use them as a glorified pause button. This is the Shout Dependency, and it is the 12th reason your build is failing. You're not mastering the voice, you're using it to hide from the consequences of your poor Magicka management. The primary offender here is the shout Become Ethereal, Fim Z Gron. Lore-wise, this shout allows the Dragonborn to fade into the void, becoming ghost-like and invulnerable. It is a profound meditation on the impermanence of matter. Gameplay-wise, however, for the pure mage, it is essentially a timeout call. Here is the standard combat loop for a high-level mage on master difficulty. You enter a room. You dual cast Incinerate 4 times. It looks impressive. The Draugr Deathlord is at half health, but your Magicka bar is empty. The Deathlord is charging you with an Ebony Warhammer. You have no armor. You have no stamina to sprint. You have no Magicka to stagger him. So you panic shout, "Fame!" Your body turns ghostly grey. The music muffles. The Deathlord swings his hammer and it passes harmlessly through your chest. You are safe. But you are also useless. You cannot attack while ethereal. You cannot cast. You cannot interact with objects. You're simply standing there, breathing heavily, watching your blue Magicka bar tick up pixel by pixel. The Deathlord is standing right in front of you, staring into your soul, waiting for the ghost effect to wear off so he can resume turning you into paste. This is not a battle of titans. It is a game of peekaboo played by a coward. The reliance on become ethereal turns combat into a disjointed rhythmic stutter. You fight for 5 seconds, then you ghost for 10 seconds. Fight, ghost, fight, ghost. It destroys the flow of the game. It breaks the immersion of being a powerful wizard and replaces it with the reality of a resource-starved mechanic abuser. You are exploiting a loophole in the enemy AI, which doesn't know how to handle an invincible target, just to wait for your batteries to recharge. Compare this to the warrior's use of shouts. A warrior uses elemental fury to swing their sword faster than the eye can follow. They use Marked for Death to shatter the enemy's armor rating before delivering a killing blow. They use shouts to escalate the violence. The pure mage uses shouts to pause the violence because they cannot sustain it. There is a deep irony in the lore of the Greybeards regarding this. Paarthurnax teaches you that to master a shout, you must take its concept into your very being. To shout fire, you must be the fire. To shout fade, you must understand the void. The pure mage understands the void perfectly. They understand emptiness, because that is the state of their Magicka bar 90% of the time. You're meditating on fade not out of spiritual enlightenment, but out of necessity. You wish to not exist because existing as a mage in front of a bandit chief is fatal. Beyond become ethereal, the pure mage also leans heavily on ice form, Is Slennus. This shout encases enemies in blocks of ice. It sounds cool, but in practice it is just another stop button. You open a door, 3 enemies rush you. You shout ice form, they freeze and fall over. Now you have a choice. You can hit them, which breaks the ice and wakes them up immediately, or you can run away. Most mages run away. You use the shout to disengage, to flee, to reset the encounter. You're using the mighty power of the Dover to facilitate a tactical retreat. It is the Dragonborn equivalent of throwing sand in someone's eyes and running for the exit. Then there is the unrelenting force, Fusrodar, dependency. Every player uses this, of course. But for the warrior, Fusrodar is a crowd control tool to set up a ground and pound. For the pure mage, it is a get-off-me tool. You use it because you failed to kill the target at range. They got too close. The paper tiger paradox kicked in. You're about to die, so you shout them across the room. This buys you maybe 4 seconds while they stand up. You use those 4 seconds to miss 2 firebolts because your hands are shaking. Then they are back in your face. The tragedy here is that the pure mage is often discouraged from using the damage shouts. Consider Fire Breath. If you are a destruction mage, you can cast a fireball that does more damage than the base Fire Breath shout, and you can do it more frequently. The shout cooldown, often 30-90 seconds, makes damage shouts inefficient compared to spells, so the magic shouts are useless to a mage because your hands do it better. This leaves only the utility shouts. Slow time, whirlwind sprint, become ethereal. You become a wizard who screams at time and space just to survive the fact that his fireball wasn't strong enough. There is a fascinating community debate regarding the shout cooldown reduction meta. Players realise that if you equip an Amulet of Talos, 20% reduction, and use the Shrine of Talos, 20% reduction, you can get shouts to recharge faster. But the pure mage is usually wearing a necklace of Fortify Magicka or Destruction Cost Reduction. To optimise shouts, you have to sacrifice your magic jewellery. To optimise magic, you have to accept long shout cooldowns. The game forces you to choose, are you a wizard or are you a tongue? If you try to be both without the restoration loop exploits, you end up mediocre at both. You cast a weak spell, run out of mana, shout Ice Form, and then have to wait 60 seconds before you can shout again, during which you are running in circles. Let's look at Dragonrend, yours after all. This is the shout essential for killing dragons. It forces them to land. For a warrior, Dragonrend is the start of the fight. The dragon lands and the warrior charges in to bash its skull. For a pure mage, Dragonrend is the start of the panic. You shout the dragon down. It lands. Now what? You're a squishy mage. The dragon is on the ground, angry and within biting range. You realise too late that fighting a dragon in the air was actually safer for you. In the air, you could dodge the breath. On the ground, the dragon has a bite hitbox the size of a carriage. You forced the dragon to play your game, and then you remembered you're bad at the ground game. So you end up hiding behind a rock, casting Conjure Storm Atronach, and hoping the Atronach holds aggro while you peek out like a frightened gopher. There is also the quiet casting interaction we touched on earlier. While silent shouts are useful for stealth, they rob the shout of its psychological impact. The lore says the voice is a projection of authority. When the greybeards speak, the mountain shakes. When a stealth mage whispers "Yol," from a dark corner, it feels petty. It feels like you're afraid to raise your voice. You're whispering the language of creation because you don't want the guards to hear you. It diminishes the majesty of the mechanic. Furthermore, relying on shouts highlights the lack of ultimate abilities in the magic system itself. Why does a master wizard need to shout to stop time? Why isn't there a chronomancy spell? Why does a master wizard need to shout to become ethereal? Why isn't there a phase shift spell? The fact that you have to borrow from the warrior to Nordic power set to perform these basic utility functions proves that the College of Winterhold's curriculum is incomplete. The magic system failed to give you the tools to survive, so you are forced to use the brute force magic of the ancient Nords to patch the holes in your spellbook. Consider the DLC shout, Dragon Aspect, Mulkadiv. This shout summons a spectral set of armor, increases power attack damage, and reduces shout cooldowns. Visually, it looks amazing, but read the stats. Power attack damage, armor rating. It is designed for a melee fighter. The ultimate Super Saiyan mode of the Dragonborn offers almost nothing to the pure mage, aside from slightly faster shout cooldowns. The game is telling you, this power is for hitting things with a stick. Why are you still wearing a dress? Even the summoning shouts betray you. Call Dragon, Odaviing, or Summon Durnavir. You shout, you wait. The dragon arrives. Now you have a giant chaotic ally flying around. This sounds great until Odaviing breathes fire on the enemies you were trying to calm with illusion magic, or Durnavir summons bonemen that block the doorway you were trying to run through. The chaos of the shout summons often conflicts with the precision required for mage gameplay. You lose control of the battlefield, and let's not forget the accidental shout. You're in the college library. You're trying to talk to Urag Groshub. You hit the shout button instead of the sprint button. Fuss. Books fly everywhere. The darker texts scatter. Urag looks at you with infinite disdain. Do you think you're the first to discover the secrets of the voice? Clean that up. As a mage, you are supposed to be disciplined, but the shout mechanic is inherently loud and clumsy. It fits the barbarian knocking over tables. It does not fit the scholar. The shout dependency ultimately reveals that the pure mage is not a self-sufficient entity. You are a hybrid who refuses to admit it. You're using the voice to compensate for the fact that destruction magic has no crowd control, alteration has no invulnerability frames, and restoration cannot heal you fast enough to tank a hit. You're duct taping your build together with the Thuum, so the next time you find yourself crouched behind a pillar in Skuldafn, Magicka empty, health low, waiting for the cooldown timer on Become Ethereal to refresh so you can step out for 3 seconds of safety. Ask yourself, is this power, or is this just a very fancy way of hiding? The voice was meant to conquer nations. You're using it to take a breather. That is not the way of the tongue, and it certainly isn't the way of a master wizard. It is the way of the prey. While you are busy hiding in the void with Become Ethereal or cowering behind Lydia, there is a fundamental force of nature waiting to expose the most glaring weakness in your wardrobe, the elements themselves. We have established that physical weapons crush you because you lack armor rating. But surely as a master of the arcane, you should be resilient against magic, right? You should be able to walk through fire like a Daedra. Wrong. In fact, the pure mage is often the most flammable object in Skyrim. This is the reality of elemental resistance deficiencies, and it is the 13th reason you are failing. The misconception stems from the idea that offensive power equals defensive mastery. You think because you can cast a fireball you understand fire. But the game engine treats incoming damage with cold, hard math, and that math hates cloth. Consider the mechanic of the ancient dragon's breath attack. Whether it is fire or frost, the breath is not a single projectile, it is a rapid-fire stream of damage ticks. On Master or Legendary difficulty, an ancient dragon's fire breath deals hundreds of points of damage per second. Now, look at your character sheet. If you are wearing the standard Archmage's robes, Moriki, and some generic boots, what is your resist fire rating? Unless you're a Dark Elf, Dunmer, it is likely 0. When that breath hits you, you take 100% of the damage. Your health bar, which is already stunted because you put all your points into Magicka, vanishes instantly. It's not a fight, it's an execution. You're an ice cube being dropped into a deep fryer. Armor wearers have a distinct advantage here, not because of the armor rating, which doesn't affect magic damage, but because of the slots. A warrior in dragonplate boots and a dragonplate helmet has 2 extra armor slots that are typically enchanted with resistances. They prioritize survival. The pure mage, however, is addicted to Magicka Regen and cost reduction. You fill your ring and necklace slots with fortified destruction because you want to cast more spells. You sacrifice defense for offense. You assume that you can just dodge the fire, but you cannot dodge a cone of breath that covers half a football field. This deficiency is most painful when fighting other mages, specifically those wielding ice magic. The Cryomancer enemy type is the hard counter to the pure mage. When an ice spike hits you, it deals health damage, yes, but it also drains stamina and applies a slow effect. As a robe-wearing mage, your only defense is movement. You need to sprint, strafe, and backpedal. The moment you get hit by frost, your stamina is gone. You cannot sprint. Your movement speed is reduced to a crawl. You are now waddling slowly across the room while the enemy mage winds up another spear of ice. Without resist frost gear, which you didn't enchant because you were too busy enchanting Fortify Magicka, you are trapped in a death spiral. You are frozen in place, watching your death approach at a leisurely pace. Then there is the Shock Mage. We touched on this with the Magicka Regeneration Lie, but it bears repeating in the context of resistance. Lightning travels instantly. It is hit scan. You cannot dodge it. If an enemy mage casts Thunderbolt, you are getting hit. If you have 0 resist shock, you lose health and Magicka. A warrior getting hit by lightning just loses health. They can still swing their axe. A mage getting hit by lightning loses their ammo. You're silenced by the damage type itself. Therefore, resist shock is not just a defensive stat for a mage, it is an offensive requirement. If you don't have it, you get shut down. Yet the standard robe sets rarely offer elemental resistances. They offer regen, which we know is useless in combat. The community has long identified the mandatory scavenger hunt required to fix this. The Agent of Mara quest. Most optimized mages rush to Riften immediately, not to join the Thieves Guild, but to hand out pamphlets for the Temple of Mara. The reward for this quest is a permanent 115% resist magic active effect. It is a desperate scramble. You're doing chores for love priests just to survive a basic dragon fight. It highlights how desperate the native stats of the mage are. You need every hidden buff you can find because your gear provides nothing. There is also the Breton privilege debate. Bretons have a racial passive, 25% magic resistance. They also have Dragon Skin, which absorbs 50% of Magicka for 60 seconds. If you're playing a High Elf, Altmer, for the extra Magicka, or a human, you are statistically inferior in survival. The community often jokes that the only viable pure mage on Legendary difficulty is a Breton, simply because they start with the resistance that robes fail to provide. If your build relies on a specific race to not die instantly, the class design is flawed. Let's delve into the obscure math of magic resistance versus elemental resistance. These are 2 different caps. Resist magic, e.g. from the Lord Stone or Agent of Mara, reduces all magic damage. It caps at 85%. Resist fire, frost, shock, e.g. from enchantments or potions, reduces specific damage. It also caps at 85%. Crucially, these stack multiplicatively. If you have 85% magic resist and 85% fire resist, you take almost no damage from fire. You can swim in lava. A Battlemage in enchanted armor can easily hit both caps. They have the enchant slots and the durability to swap gear. A pure mage in the Archmage's robes is stuck with the enchantments on the robes. You cannot swap the enchantment on a unique item. You're stuck with 0% resistance on your chest piece. You're mathematically locked out of the god mode tankiness that armor wearers enjoy. The lore behind elemental resistance is fascinating. In the Elder Scrolls, resistance is often tied to the physical properties of the creature or material. Nords resist frost because their physiology is adapted to the cold. Dunmer resist fire because their skin is literally ashen. Cloth has no physiology, it is inert. By wearing robes, you are presenting your raw, unshielded flesh to the elements. There is a text called Glories and Laments, which discusses the fall of the Ayleids. It mentions that despite their magical supremacy, they were often defeated by the sheer resilience of the Needs, proto-humans, and the elemental fury of the battlefields. The Ayleids wore feathers and silk, the Needs wore leather and iron. When the fire rained down, the silk burned. You're repeating the mistake of the Ayleids. You're prioritizing elegance over insulation. Consider the fire rune trap. You're walking through a dungeon, it is dark, you don't see the rune on the floor. Boom. If you're a warrior with high health and maybe a resist fire potion active, you survive with burns. If you're a pure mage with 200 health and 0% resistance, you're a ragdoll bouncing off the ceiling. The game is full of these vibe checks. Runes as wall traps, exploding spiders. They deal elemental damage. They are designed to punish low health, low resistance characters. That is you. You are the target audience for the exploding spider. This leads to the potion addiction. To compensate for your lack of gear-based resistance, you must become an alchemist. You need to carry stacks of resist fire, resist frost, and resist shock potions. Before every fight, you have to open the menu and chug a cocktail. Hold on, Mr. Dragon, let me drink my juice. It breaks the flow, it costs weight, and if you forget to drink it, or if the potion expires mid-breath, you die. Permanent resistance on armor is passive. It is always there. It doesn't require menu management. It doesn't expire. The Battlemage puts on Otar's mask, a dragon priest mask that grants 30% resistance to fire, frost, and shock. They are ready for anything. The pure mage is rifling through their pockets looking for a snowberry extract. There is also the visual tragedy of the impact effects. When you get hit by fire in Skyrim, your character screams. The screen turns red. The sound of burning flesh sizzles. When you have scent resistance, the health drain is so fast that the low health, heartbeat sound starts almost immediately. You spend your combat encounters in a state of sensory overload. The screen is red, the controller is vibrating, the character is screaming, it is stressful. When you have 85% resistance, the fire hits you, and your health bar barely moves. You feel like a Terminator. You can stand in the fire and cast your return spell calmly. The difference in game feel is immense. Resistance buys you the mental bandwidth to aim. Lack of resistance puts you in panic mode. Let's not forget the vampires, enemies not you. Vampires use the spell Vampiric Drain. It sucks health. It is a magic effect. If you have no magic resistance, they drain you dry in seconds. The irony, you are the Archmage, and a generic vampire fledgling is drinking your soul through a straw because you forgot to wear a necklace of resistance. The pure mage often tries to counter this with the ward spell, which we already debunked. I'll just block the fire. But as we discussed, the dragon's breath breaks the ward, so you are left with your skin, and your skin is soft. The Lord Stone is the only saving grace for many mages. It gives 50 armor and 25% magic resist. But by taking the Lord Stone, you're giving up the Atronach Stone, Absorption, or the Apprentice Stone, Regen. You're constantly making sacrifices. Do I want to regenerate Magicka, or do I want to not die instantly? The warrior doesn't have to make this choice. Their armor keeps them alive, so they can take the Steed Stone for carry weight, or the Atronach Stone for mage-killing utility. Your build is defined by compromise. Even the environment hates you. In the Dragonborn DLC, there are pools of acidic water in Apocrypha. There are burning ash wastes. If you step in them with low health and no resistance, the environmental damage ticks can actually kill you. Imagine explaining that to the Greybeards. How did the Dragonborn die? He stepped in a puddle. Ultimately, the lack of elemental resistance is the final proof that the developers expected you to get hit and expected you to wear armor to mitigate it. The cloth class of items is a remnant of a bygone RPG era where wizards stood in the back. but Skyrim puts you in the front. When you face the Ebony Warrior and he shouts fire breath at you and you disintegrate, remember, it wasn't a glitch, it wasn't bad luck, it was the fact that you went to war wrapped in a bedsheet and expected it to stop a blast furnace. Resistance is not optional. In the harsh climate of Skyrim, it is the difference between a legend and a corpse, and robes, for all their fancy enchantments, are just incredibly flammable kindling for the pyre. We have dismantled your defences, exposed your offensive inefficiencies, and mocked your reliance on undead babysitters. Now, we arrive at the most heartbreaking betrayal in the Mage's repertoire, the School of Illusion. For the aspiring, pure Mage, illusion is the ultimate promise of intellectual superiority. Why fight the bandit when you can make the bandit kill his friends? Why take damage when you can simply ask the enemy to stop attacking? It feels like the god mode of Skyrim, until the moment it stops working. This is the reality of when illusion spells fail, and it is the 14th reason you are failing. Illusion is the most binary skill tree in the game. It either solves the encounter instantly or it does absolutely nothing. There is no middle ground. There is no partial damage. There is only the terrifying notification in the top left corner of your screen. Target is too powerful for fury. The failure usually happens at the worst possible time. You're prowling through a Nordic ruin feeling smug. You have the quiet casting perk. You're invisible. You see a room full of Draga. You cast Mayhem or a dual-casted Frenzy. You expect chaos, but you forgot that you leveled up. This is the cruelty of Skyrim's level scaling. As you level up, the enemies level up with you. But your illusion spells do not automatically scale. A base Fury spell works on creatures up to level 6. An adversary works on creatures up to level 12, roughly. Even with all the perks, Kindred Mage, Animage, Rage, you're fighting a constant mathematical battle against the level cap of your enemies. You enter the final chamber. A Draugr Deathlord bursts out of a sarcophagus. He is level 40. Your spell cap, even dual-casted, might hover around level 35-45, depending on your perks and vampire status. If the math is off by even a single digit, the spell washes over him like a gentle breeze. He does not turn on his friends. He does not calm down. He charges you. And because you invested heavily in illusion, you likely neglected destruction or conjuration. Your primary weapon has just misfired. You're standing in the dark holding a spell that doesn't work, facing an enemy that wants to murder you with no backup plan. The pacifist run ends violently. The law of illusion is fascinatingly precarious. In the text, Reality and Other Falsehoods, it is suggested that illusion is not mind control, but rather the manipulation of the sensory data the universe feeds the victim. You aren't changing the bandit's mind. You're changing the light that hits his eyes and the sound that hits his ears to make his friend look like a wolf. However, powerful minds, or mindless constructs, can see through the lie. This is why the skill tree requires the Master of the Mind perk to affect Daedra, Undead, and Automatons. Without that specific level 90 perk, illusion is useless in 50% of Skyrim's dungeons. Dwarven ruins, useless. Nordic crypts, useless. Vampire lairs, mostly useless. Vampires have high illusion resistance. You're playing a build that requires you to grind to level 90 just to be allowed to participate in the game's main content. Until then, you are essentially a glorified flashlight holder. But the ultimate failure of illusion is the dragon immunity. Dragons are immune to illusion. Period. You cannot calm a dragon. You cannot fear a dragon, unless it is the scripted Dragon Rend effect, which is a shout, not a spell. You cannot frenzy a dragon to make it attack a mudcrab. So, the pure illusionist has absolutely no answer for the main threat of the game. When a dragon attacks, you are forced to rely on your weak destruction spells or your follower. The school of magic you dedicated your life to is laughed at by the Dover. There is also the Call to Arms tragedy. This master-level spell buffs your allies. It increases their health, stamina, and combat skills. It sounds amazing. You buff Lydia. She becomes a tank. But here is the bug feature. If you cast Call to Arms in a town to help the guards fight a vampire attack, the offensive nature of the spell hits civilians. If you miss and hit Nazim, tempting as it is, or a chicken, the entire town turns hostile. You tried to help. Now you're being chased by the Whiterun guards. Illusion is messy. It has a blast radius that creates political problems. The community debate often centres on whether illusion is broken or trash. The Necromage Vampire illusionist, which we discussed, is broken. They can push the level caps high enough to affect almost anything except dragons, but the mortal, pure mage, they hit a wall. The Ebony Warrior is level 80. Your spells will never work on him without exploits or potion loops. Kastug is level 90. He is immune. The hardest bosses in the game simply opt out of your mechanics. This creates a psychological fragility in the player. You stop trusting your magic. You find yourself saving the game, save scumming, before every cast. Will this work, or will he resist? A warrior knows his sword will hit. A destruction mage knows the fireball will do damage. The illusionist is gambling every time they pull the trigger. There is also the invisible reset loop. When fury fails, the illusionist casts invisibility and crouches. The enemy runs to where you were. You move. You wait. The combat music stops. You try again. This isn't combat. This is tedious harassment. You are poking the bear and hiding over and over again. It lacks the visceral satisfaction of a duel. It feels cheap. And let's talk about the Harmony spell, the master level calm spell. It takes 3 seconds to cast. The wind-up problem again. If you pull it off, everyone stops fighting. The dungeon becomes a cocktail party. Nice weather, the bandit says, sheathing his axe. But you still have to kill them to clear the dungeon or get the loot, so now you have to walk up to a peaceful, smiling bandit and stab him in the back. It turns the Dragonborn into a psychopath. There is no honour in Harmony. It is just a pause button that lets you murder people who aren't fighting back. Ultimately, illusion exposes the lack of agency in the pure mage build. You are dependent on the enemy's AI being manipulatable. When the AI breaks, or resists, or flies, dragons, you're left with nothing. You're a trickster god who ran out of tricks. And when that Draugr Deathlord resists your pacify and raises his axe, you realise that a comforting lie is no match for a sharp piece of ebony. And so we arrive at the final hurdle, the last bastion of your stubbornness, and the ultimate reason why your pure mage is failing while the rest of Skyrim conquers the province. We have talked about magic, about enchantments, about shouts. But we have ignored the hammer. We have ignored the anvil. We have ignored the smell of charcoal and the heat of the smelter. You are failing because you're ignoring the smithing tree. The pure mage scoffs at this. I am a scholar, you say, dusting off your flimsy blue sleeves. I do not toil with manual labour. I do not grind metal. That is for the companions. That is for the common Nord. This elitism is your death sentence. The ignored smithing tree is the missing variable in your survival equation. The game engine of Skyrim is built on a simple truth. Physical mitigation is king. We established in Section 8 that you should be wearing armour, but wearing base armour is only half the solution. A standard Iron Cuirass offers protection, yes, but an Iron Cuirass, legendary, offers salvation. The mechanics of tempering allow you to double, triple, or even quadruple the protective value of an item. This is not a linear progression. It is exponential when combined with the fortify smithing enchantments and potions we discussed earlier. A pure mage who converts to the Battlemage philosophy but refuses to smith is still walking around in fine or superior quality gear. You are leaving hundreds of points of armor rating on the table. The armor cap in Skyrim is 567 displayed rating. To reach this, you generally need to smith your gear. If you don't, you're taking unnecessary damage from every arrow, every bite, and every sword swing. By refusing to smith, you're voluntarily keeping your damage reduction at 40% instead of the capped 80%. You're taking double damage because you think soot looks bad on your hands. But let's look deeper. Smithing isn't just about defense. It is about the backup weapon. Every mage runs out of magicka. Even the most optimized build has moments of drought, shock damage, long fights, missed shots. When the blue bar is empty, you must draw steel. The pure mage pulls out a found iron dagger or a bound weapon. The smithing mage pulls out a dragonbone dagger, legendary, infused with chaos damage. The difference is staggering. A base dagger tickles the enemy. A smith-improved dagger executes them. You don't need perks in one-handed to make a sharp knife deadly. You just need the smithing skill to sharpen it to a molecular edge. The lore provides the ultimate rebuttal to the mages don't smith argument. Look at the Dwemer. The deep elves. The Dwemer were tonal architects. They were arguably the most advanced magic users in the history of Nirn. They manipulated the fabric of reality itself. Did they wear robes? Did they shy away from the forge? No. They were the greatest smiths the world has ever seen. Their entire culture was a fusion of magic and engineering. They understood that metal is just another form of magicka, frozen in a solid state, waiting to be shaped. Kagranak, the High Engineer, created tools, Sunder, Keening, Wraithguard, to manipulate the heart of Lorcan. He didn't cast a spell with his bare hands to touch the heart of a god. He built a hammer. By refusing to smith, you're not acting like a high wizard. You're acting like a Breton's hedge wizard. The true masters of the arcane, the Dwemer, Solthasil, the ancient Nord enchanters, were all crafters. They built their power. There is also the economy of weight. This is a subtle, obscure lore mechanic that many players miss. When you temper armor, its weight does not increase. Its value and its protection skyrocket, but it remains just as light or heavy as the base item. This means the value per pound of your gear increases. But more importantly, the protection per pound ratio becomes infinite. A pure mage wearing a glass cuirass, untempered, is carrying weight for mediocre protection. A mage wearing a glass cuirass, legendary, is carrying the same weight for god-tier protection. Efficiency is the hallmark of intelligence. If you claim to be an intelligence-based character, surely you should choose the most efficient gear. The community debate regarding the grind is valid. Yes, leveling smithing is tedious. We all know the Iron Dagger meta, though patched in later versions to favour jewellery and dwarven bows. It involves spamming the craft button. It is boring. My character wouldn't spend weeks making 500 gold rings, you argue, but would your character spend weeks dying? The grind is the montage. It is the period of study. Just as you study spell tomes to learn Fireball, you must study the metallurgy to ensure your Fireball caster doesn't break when a giant steps on them. Furthermore, smithing unlocks the Arcane Blacksmith perk. This is essential. It allows you to improve magical items. If you find a unique robe or a unique mask, like our friend Maroke, you cannot improve it without this perk. Wait, actually, most clothing cannot be tempered. This is the final insult of the robe. You can have Arcane Blacksmith, 100 Smithing, and a Potion of the Gods, and you cannot upgrade the Archmage's robes at a workbench. They have no material keyword. They are static. Armor can be improved. So the smithing tree is the final proof that the game wants you to wear armor. The entire crafting system is designed to make armor better. It offers nothing to the cloth wearer except jewelry crafting. Let's talk about the jewelry loop. Even if you refuse to wear armor, you need smithing to make the rings and necklaces for your enchantments. I'll just find them, you say. RNG, random number generation, is cruel. You might find a gold ring, but maybe you want a gold diamond ring for the aesthetic or because you believe, falsely but thematically, it holds magic better. Smithing allows you to create the vessel for your power. You are the creator. You mine the ore, alteration, transmute or spell. You smelt the ingot. You forge the ring. You enchant the ring. This is the full circle of the mage. You're using magic to create wealth, transmute. Using skill to create form, smithing, and using soul to create power, enchanting. Skipping the middle step breaks the circle. There is a visceral satisfaction in the kill cam when you are wielding a weapon you made. The pure mage watches the enemy burn. It is distant. The battlesmith mage, when forced into melee, slams a dragonbone mace into a Draugr's face. You know the weight of that mace. You folded the metal. You quenched it in mammoth blood. It is personal. Consider the follower gear aspect again. If you insist on hiding behind Lydia, the least you can do is give her good gear. You cannot improve her survivability with restoration spells alone. But if you hand her a set of Daedric armor, legendary, with Fortify health, she becomes an immortal wall. Your smithing skill directly buffs your meat shield. If you don't smith, Lydia wears her default steel. She kneels. You die. If you smith, Lydia stands. You live. Your refusal to craft is literally killing your friends. The dragon scale irony. As a mage, you kill dragons. You absorb their souls for shouts. But what do you do with their bones and scales? They are heavy. They clog your inventory. You sell them. You are selling the trophies of your greatest victories to a general goods merchant who will turn them into soup ladles. If you smith, you turn those scales into dragon scale armor. Light armor, high protection. It is the ultimate mage armor. It looks arcane, organic, and terrifying. Wearing the skin of the dragon you killed is the ultimate assertion of dominance. Selling it is the ultimate act of capitalism. Be a conqueror, not a merchant. And finally, the Godslayer archetype. In the end, Skyrim is a game about becoming a god. The endgame bosses, Karstag the Ebony Warrior, are stat checks. They check your armor rating. They check your damage output. They do not care about your roleplay. If you walk up to Karstag in robes with no smithing upgrades, he will hit you for 1200 damage. You have 300 health. Math does not forgive. If you walk up to him in tempered armor, you mitigate 80% of that. You survive the hit. You heal, you win. The smithing tree is not a warrior skill. It is a survival skill. It is the skill of preparation. It is the skill of altering the physical world to suit your needs, which is the very definition of magic. So go to the forge, pick up the hammer. It is heavy, yes, it is hot. But as the sparks fly and the metal sings, realize that you are forging something stronger than iron. You are forging a version of yourself that can actually survive the province you are trying to save. Stop being a paper tiger. Stop being a glass cannon. Be a Dragonborn. And there we have it. Travellers. We have stripped the vanity from the mage, traded the silk for steel, and replaced the fragile ego with the hardened resilience of the vampire smith. We have journeyed from the freezing steps of the College of Winterhold, where novices freeze in their thin robes, to the molten heat of the Sky Forge, where legends are tempered. It is a lot to take in. I know. The dream of the pure mage, that figure of effortless power, untouched by the crude weapons of the world, is a beautiful dream. But Skyrim is a waking nightmare of claws, teeth, and frost. It demands that you wake up. It demands that you adapt. But don't let this dishearten you. There is still magic in the world. There is still the wonder of the Aurora Borealis dancing over the throat of the world. There is still the quiet satisfaction of reading a book in the Arcaneum while the blizzard howls outside. You can still be a wizard. You just have to be a smart one. Take a breath now. Let the tension of the combat fade. Imagine your character, not running in fear but standing tall on a mountain peak. They are clad in armor that gleams under the moonlight, a mask of ancient power on their face, a weapon of their own making at their side. They are safe. They are powerful. They are ready. The fire in the hearth has burned down to embers. The shadows are lengthening in the corners of the room. The dragons are sleeping, at least for now. You have done enough learning for one night, so loosen your grip on the controller or the mouse. Let your shoulders drop. Close your eyes and listen to the wind whistling through the pines. You are the Dragonborn, and tomorrow you will conquer. But for tonight, rest. Sweet dreams.